Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the Demons have locked in a top 4 spot and the double chance for the 3rd year in a row. Let's just take a moment to appreciate the level of consistency that we have had with this team over the last 36 months. 51 wins, 19 losses and a draw from our past 71 games. What a time to be a Demons fan. George is being tactically managed this week, so joining me solo tonight to dissect our victory over the Hawks is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonlanders, and good evening, George. I hope you're not listening to this live. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a tactical sub. I thought it was his pre-finals bye.
I just assumed he's being managed this week. He does have a prior engagement, but we will be using him as a super sub off the bench throughout the night. He's provided us with a couple of clips based on some of the questions that we've received for tonight's show, as well as he's giving a tribute to Max for his 200th game. So whilst George isn't physically with us tonight, he will be with us in spirit. Big man, let's get into a bit of the housekeeping before we get started. Each week I do ask our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We absolutely love the feedback, or read it out on the show. And the 5 stars really does help boost the podcast, and it does get more people listening. Demons Barnacle writes, I wish I'd found this sooner. The definitive MFC supporter podcast. This pod is a highly entertaining and insightful listen from beginning to end. If you're a Demon Tragic and you like your data, you'll want to soak up every minute of the 3 hosts' considered, intelligent and respectful commentary of the team we love. My son and I have been known to listen to the intro music in the car. Great for when we need a pump up. Cheers, guys. This is a real treat for my red and blue beating heart. Well, thanks, Demon Barnacle, for that great review. I'm glad that the podcast can bring families together like that. Jack writes, go on.
And before you go on, Andy, I'm absolutely amazed that that song's getting a play. For the pump up, but it's even got the cassette tape wobble in the middle. So it's very good how you've made sure that's included.
Well, I did rip that off a cassette tape.
From tape too.
Originally, when we started the podcast, I had just the ripped audio from the YouTube video that's around there. But I did find the cassette on eBay, and I was able to hook up a cassette player. If anyone remembers what a cassette player is, I'm sure you do, Pim Man.
Yeah,
I was able to connect
rusting Nakamichi in the shed.
Yeah, I was able to connect it to my computer somehow. I can't even remember how I did it, and I was able to get clean audio off, but it did still have a bit of that tape sounding sound. Well, let's get back into it. Jack writes, if you love the red and blue, then this is the podcast for you. Very thoughtful and detailed analysis of everything Melbourne Demons. Andy, George and B-Man do a power of work each and every week to put together this great podcast. Jack. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate the review. Spargonigus writes, entertaining, educational, edifying. Love these guys. They provide a balm after a cutting loss and a place to celebrate after a win. It's certainly a long podcast, but I wouldn't have it any other way. A great blend of emotion, statistical analysis, and tactical theory. Keep it up, fellas. And that was Demonland post to Spargonigus. Thanks, Spargs. Jumping Jack Clennett writes, thanks a lot for your terrific show, boys. I admire your understanding and knowledge of the tactics, etc. And I can't help but identify with your MFC SS, Andy. I listened to your podcast when out jogging and hardly noticed the kilometres being covered. Keep it up. It's great. Well, that's another long-time Demonlander representing there. Well, thanks, Jumping Jack. Now, I do have that rule that I only read the 5-star reviews and give them a shout out, but I can't help but think that this 1-star review, Bin Man, that we were given is a mistake based on the written review we were given. So hopefully Swatter5, who signed off as PW Wingman, can revisit the review that he's given and change that 1-star to a 5 stars. Had to be a mistake. We'd really appreciate that. Swatter5 with his 1-star review writes, I've been listening to this informative podcast for around 3 years, and in my opinion, if you want realistic information about the game, comprehensive statistics and some fun, including MFCSS, then that is better than anything on the internet, making the mainstream media very shallow. Special thanks to George for keeping faith using factual examples Regards, PW Wingman. So, PW, thanks for the really nice review, but if you could adjust that 1-star rating, that would be great. Keep the feedback.
You forgot the rest of it, though. So I've been listening to for 3 years and waiting for it to improve. You selectively edited it.
No, I'm reading it as is. And look, I don't mind if someone gives us a 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, whatever, 1-star, and they're willing to give us feedback. Tell us. I don't care. That's not what. But that's the 5-star review writing and not a 1-star review rating. So yeah, it had to be a mistake. Keep the feedback coming. Please give us a 5-star on Apple Podcast, and please don't forget to click the write a review link and write that review as well as the 5 stars. We'll read it out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Threads, and you want to leave a feedback or post a question or a comment for the show, you can post under our podcast posts each week or just slide into our DMs. We won't read out your real name on the show. And in addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland podcast is now available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel. If you want to chat with other Demon fans, if you've never been to our forum, head on over to demonland.com. You can sign up, chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It's absolutely free. And in addition to being able to post questions and comments for the podcast, you can just get on and chat with other D's fans and discuss all things Demons related. So join in on the conversation. And if you want to join us on the air tonight and talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about in a few minutes, then please give us a call on 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute. I'll bring you on when there's a break in the conversation. And if you want during the week, call that number. You can leave a voicemail. We do have a few tonight. And I'll just let you know that there is a 2-minute limit to the voicemail. So make sure you know what you're going to say and get it in there before the 2 minutes is up. There's nothing I can do about that to extend it. If you're listening live and you can join us in the chat room, simply head on over to demonland.com/podcast. We'll try to be more attentive to the comments and questions posted there, but it might be hard tonight. There's only 2 of us in the studio. We are live every Monday, so if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. I'll get into the match wrap-up, Bim Man. The goal of this match was simple. Win and we sew up a top 4 spot, or lose and go to Sydney, needing to win or draw to keep the dream of a double chance alive. And after another slow start, the D's hammered out the win, locking in that all-important top 4 berth for the 3rd year running, a feat that the D's have not achieved in 60 years. It was an arm wrestle for most of the match, with the D's not able to break the shackles of the Hawks' talons until the final term. And speaking of shackles, Hawks tagger Finn McGuinness had them tightly bound to Clayton Oliver, keeping him to a rare 14 disposals for the match. And with the exception of Jack Viney, who was having a career-best season, all of the D stars were well down on their best numbers, with Petrarca 22 possessions, Brayshaw 20 and Sparrow 17. Listeners to the podcast will know that I absolutely love a midfielder that kicks goals, and all of Petrarca, Oliver, Brayshaw and Sparrow hit the scoreboard, with Oliver with the Oliver and Petrarca goals in the last quarter helping to break those shackles. Still searching for the right mix-up forward, Melksham was on fire with 3 goals, 4 from 15 disposals. JVR kicked 3 and Smith 2 from their 7 disposals each. Cozzy, who we will talk about later, was really off his game with only the 5 possessions, with only 1 of them being effective. Our backline had a shaky start and seemed to be a little bit disorganised. That may have been a result of how quickly the ball was coming in on the turnover, or due to the Hawks switching that we hadn't worked out yet. Once the D's adjusted their game plan to account for Hawthorn's tactics, both May and Lever were able to pick off most of the Hawks' forays up forward. Jake Lever in particular was very solid, marking everything that came his way. 19 disposals, 13 marks, 10 intercepts, just outstanding, and highlights the need for 3 talls in defence to help free Jake up to play in this manner, and more on that later. Trent Rivers had another incredible game, bolstering his credentials of being one of the most improved players this season. His 27 disposals and 9 intercepts for almost 500 metres gained highlights his importance as that springboard from defence with his run and booming kicks. Ed Langdon too was instrumental on the wing, finishing with 18 touches and 435 metres gained. The win was a grind, but the reward was locking in the double chance. There are still a few permutations possible where the D's can grab second place on the ladder for the 2nd year in a row, but that hinges on the results of other games as well as our own. And by the time the ball is bounced in anger in Sydney on Sunday, we will know where we stand. We will go through all those scenarios a little bit later on and give our own thoughts on what would be the ideal scenario heading into September. So, Bim Man, what are your general thoughts on the game?
Well, first thought was how just fantastic was it to go to the MCG on a sunny, beautiful winter's day. Spring is definitely in the air. There's just no better place in the world to be. I just love it so much. Big crowd, really impressed with the crowd. 50,000, just a touch over, which was terrific. Great to beat the Hawks. I can't begin to tell you how many horrible games I've seen.
All those years.
All those years. And I think 87, the nightmare. And I think I as much as 87 hurt, not getting Jarman in 87, we would have won the flag that year. And he goes to the Hawthorn at the Hawks the next year. He stood out of football for a year because he didn't want to play for the D's and won them a flag in 88. And we get flogged in that game. There's a lot of scar tissue there from over the years from watching the Hawks beat up on us. So, even there was a period of time where they seemed to take, in the 2000s, where they seemed to take great joy in bullying us and physically going after us, even when we were down the bottom. So, anytime we beat the Hawks is a very, very good day at the footy. And I thought it was a really fascinating game, really interesting tactically. We'll get into that a little bit. Brad, what's Brad Hodge? I was about to say, what's the ex-Hawthorn skipper Hodge? I said last week that he had his top 5 coaches, and Goodwin wasn't amongst his top 5 coaches, and Mitchell was. Well, again, as we'll talk about a bit later, Goody gave him a tactical bath, I reckon. I think, Goodwin is just simply not given the credit he's due for his tactical smarts, and everyone loves a new shiny coach. And I rate Mitchell really highly as well, actually. Hodges number 3 on his top 5, and McRae's number 1, who's also looking a bit more miserable and down in the mouth. So, great day of the footy, and a really terrific win. Lock up top 4. Really, I don't know how you could not be thrilled as a Melbourne fan to have 3 years in a row now top 4. 60 years, did you say, since that last happened?
Yeah, so last time 60, 61, 62, 63 and 64. I'm not sure, I didn't go back, and it would have been 50. We finished in the top 4 for quite a few years running, so it's over 60 years, yeah.
In a 12-team competition. So, that really in the modern era, it's obviously the most successful team, but, there wouldn't be that many teams in the last 10, 15 years when it's increasingly getting harder for teams to back up, particularly in the last 5 years. You look at how many flag winners have struggled the next year, or even teams who have made the grand final. Swans have struggled this year. Geelong didn't make it. The 8 this year. Swans look like, they definitely will.
Swans making it. Well, now they can't drop out.
Yeah, but the Dogs, after we shellacked them in 21, missed last year. So, I think the Richmond
the Dogs also, the Dogs did make it last year. They replaced Carlton.
That's right, in the last, a bit like Sydney actually, didn't they? So,
but they didn't make it after they won. Bulldogs didn't make it the year after they won the premiership.
Yeah, right, okay. And then 21, I think in 20, when Richmond won their last flag, they didn't back up the next year, so and didn't make the finals. My point being is that I think, it was such a, it was awful going out in straight sets in the finals last year, and, it's easy then to frame that whole season as a wasted season. But as Goody's talked about, it's not about one season. It's about being in contention for multiple years, for a decade, let's say, and winning multiple flags, and you give yourself a chance to win flags when you finish top 4. That's just statistically a fact. To do what he's done is fantastic. And last year, as I said, it's framed often as in the negative. It was an amazing performance. We finished second after the home and away last year, which is easily forgotten given we went out in straight sets. And all the learnings that we got from last year that we've taken on board this season, that I really give Goodwin a lot of credit for, the way he's gone about his coaching, the way they've managed the team, the player management, the fluidity of our tactics, our ability to adapt week to week, but also how we've dealt with some of the curveballs in, losing our forward line multiple times, it feels like. So, credit to the club, credit to Goody. credit to the board and everyone off field to get, to have another successful top 4 finish.
Well, I might read out this question that was going to be in the first listener questions, but you've been talking about Goody now, so I'll talk about it now. Eva D says, firstly, love the podcast, my favourite part of the week. Appreciate all the effort that goes into it for us to enjoy. More of a comment than a question. However, when do you think Goody will get the credit he deserves within the MFC community and externally for being one of the better coaches in the AFL? Third year in a row, we've locked up a top 4 finish. No other current coach has done this. He's built a defensive game plan that teams still struggle to penetrate and has a relationship with the players that sees us lose few and also enables us to be a destination club. I also haven't even mentioned the drought-breaking premiership. On the weekend, he altered a game plan to nullify and clog up the Hawks' switching game plan, which means they just kept kicking it to May, Lever and Rivers. Yet, I'm sure everyone will keep talking about how much of a maestro Sam Mitchell is. Yes, we have an amazing list, but don't underestimate how integral Goodwin and the coaching staff are to us going all the way this year. Thankfully, I have complete confidence in them. Keen to get your thoughts. Go D's. Signed off Eva D. And can't disagree with that. 3 top 4 finishes in a row, Big Man. 51 wins, as I mentioned, in those 3 years. In the same time that the Demons have won those 51 games out of 70-odd since the start of 2021, Brisbane have won 49, Geelong 48, Sydney 45, Port 44, the Bulldogs 41 and Collingwood 40. All of those teams have dropped out of the 8 at some point in that time and we have not. And it's time that Goody got some love. And B-Man, you've given him...
Could not agree more. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, he didn't get the love he deserved in 20, 19, 18 or 17. Added to those stats in terms of 3 years in a row finishing top 4, off the top of my head, maybe Port Adelaide. I think they've 3 of the last 4 years, but there was a year they fell out.
Yeah, well, they fell out. That's what I'm...
Yeah, and maybe Geelong would be close to that. I'm not sure, but there'd be a few other teams. But added to that, you'd probably... I can't remember the number off the top of my head. You probably will, but how many weeks have we been out of the top 4 at any point in the last
Not
3
many.
years?
It's like 3-4 maximum. Yeah. It's not a lot. And
so
it might be
really
early in the year as well.
Yeah, and the question's a really good one. Is when will he get the credit he's due? I think surely by weight of numbers he'll get his credit due from Melbourne fans, and I think partly it's a function of how the game's covered. I keep going back to the media, but they put coaches up in this ridiculous post-match presser environment, and that's how the fans know the coaches often, or 360 or whatever. And he's never has been a brilliant communicator in that sense. Not like McRae. Look at how people seem to love McRae. Now he's a terrific coach. But I had a back and forth with the poster on Demonland who was calling him a great coach. I was like, give me a spell. How could you even compare him to Goodwin? Goodwin has, broken a 57-year drought. He's finished now 3 years in a row top 4. He had finished top in 21 of the home and away. He finished second last year. We're as low as 4th and as high as 2nd this year, unlikely 2nd, obviously. But also, 2017, we almost made finals. 2018, which is forgotten about. We were the Collingwood of that season. That was a phenomenal run. Yes, we ran into the Eagles over in Perth, but they went on to win the flag. So it was no great shame to lose over there. And we were gassed in any case by that stage. So, I think from memory, his win-loss record is 56% over his career, which puts him up there right with the very best coaches of all time. You talk about good coaches and great coaches. Well, Malcolm Blight, what he's regarded universally as a great coach. I think he won 2 flags, didn't he? Took a long time to get there. Ross Lyon is regarded as a great coach, hasn't won a flag. So he deserves a lot more status and credit than he gets. And I think within Melbourne Footy Club and partly out of it, and I think part of it is because we see him through the lens of, someone who's doesn't embrace the media like McRae does. So, I think that's definitely influence. But I also think that he hasn't got a sexy game plan. Like that point, I think, is such a brilliant point about what he's developed. And it played out in that game yesterday, is that his defensive system is the best defensive system in the AFL by a long, long margin, and has been ever since 2000, 20. And what should be remembered, in 2018, we were a really offensive side who could put teams away and kick goals quickly, which is something we've always had ever since, even though we're often framed as a dour defensive team. In 2018, our weakness was our defense. Our weakness was giving up goals to good teams in blocks. Remember, we couldn't stop teams scoring 3-4 goals. He went out, not only did, of course, he get Lever and May in, he built a defensive system that every other team has copied, essentially. So he took the zone defense to a whole nother level and really brought the Tigers' all-team defense to a much more all-team sophisticated level. And he'll get the credit for that eventually, just like Hardwick's now getting the credit for that sort of chaos territory football that that we've based our game plan on. So I think that history will look back on his innovations in the game, a lot more than what they're looking, it appears now. So, I think he's fantastic. He's clearly a player's coach. And there's a question we'll talk about later, but with McGuinness, his reaction to that, I see that as filtered through his player first, So, I suspect a fair bit went on to for that quarter-time break. I have my binoculars on that. I'm not sure if you were watching, but that there was a fair bit of spite in that melee, and there was a lot of back and forth, verbal back and forth between everyone but McGuinness and Oliver. And I suspect that, Goodwin's heard that and knows that, seen what the reaction is, and he's gone into bat for his player post-match. But so, I think there's some of the reasons, but that defensive stuff there, from a public's perception, one of the things that everyone loves about the Pies all season, which I've been talking about, is their biggest vulnerability, is how attacking they are. Well, they expose themselves defensively. And so, sure, they're attacking, great to watch. Channel 7, love them, fantastic. Terrific, you get 20 goals and 20 goals. That's great, but defense wins flags. And maybe Goodwin's model, and particularly in the first half of 2022, we squeeze teams, and so we weren't great to watch for a lot of neutral fans. So perhaps that's got a factor in there. Maybe, Melbourne haven't, we talked about this last week about, why we don't get more media credit. Maybe it's, as George said, it's as simple as we were never a team in the 80s that was on telly much, and so we're not a team that a lot of people knew or loved, and maybe people don't like. Maybe it's a function of that as well. But, I don't think he cares, to be honest. So, no. So, I think he's much maligned coach even within Melbourne fans. That will change if we win another flag one. Let's hope. But, yeah, he's just a fantastic coach, I think, and he's built an amazing record.
Look, I think with guys like, he got the kudos in 2021, got Coach of the Year that year, but I guess not having... he's got the one premiership. We're coming off an era of Hardwick and Chris Scott. Chris Scott only had the two bookend premierships, but he's been up in the finals. And every year you have that new flavour of the month or flavour of the year coach coming in. So
and this year was not quite McRae because he was there last year. And I know. Look, I was joking about Hodge. And I know they do this stuff for clicks and, of course they're going to leave out someone. But who does Hodge leave out of his best? This is his top 5 coaches. It was, McRae first and Hinckley third and, I forget who was second. Doesn't really matter. But Goodwin, is not in his top 5 coaches. And, I know, as I said, I know what the logic is, and that's all about creating angst and whackers like me complaining about it. But it's still disrespectful and it's way off beam, and they wouldn't do it to a Lee Matthews, or they wouldn't do it to a coach that was more universally loved, let's say. And McRae, number one, why is McRae number one? Build on what? Home and away wins don't get you nothing in footy. Home and away wins barely get, that's there wouldn't have been a delay in re-signing Hinckley if it was just on home and away wins. So, we've got home and away, and we've got a premiership, and we're in bloody good shape to win a premiership this year. Just while I think of it, because I might forget it later, on defence, I was talking last week about how my analysis for the run home in terms of the order I would put a betting order and have Melbourne at the top. And I said one of the problems for Port is defensively they're just not strong enough. Subsequently, I was listening to a podcast, and we might talk about that later, the ESPN, who got our game completely and utterly wrong because they use wrong data. But in that game, in that podcast, they were talking about Port's defence. They're currently 13 for points against, and no team has won a flag outside the top 5 points against since the Roos in the 90s. So it's, I think, 90, whatever year they won their last thing. So and they were 5th that year or 6th. So it's just simply not a profile that's going to look like winning a flag at 13 points against. It just shows their defensive vulnerabilities. Melbourne, of course, are way number one on that list now. So we've got, that's, another thing with the data's now come back around, is we've got the best, despite 2 games less than 2 wins less than Collingwood, we've got the best percentage in the AFL, which is incredible, given that we're one round short of finishing a home and away season. To have won 2 less games than the ladder leaders and have a better percentage at them, and a better percentage than Brisbane, who are often regarded as the best offensive team and get the free kick every fortnight of playing up at the Gabba. That is, any way you cut it, that's an impressive performance, both defensively and offensively as well.
Well, while you're talking statistics, why don't you get into your stats for this match against the Hawks?
So it was such a fascinating game on a lot of levels, and it's borne out in the stats, I think. So we'll go from the sort of key Melbourne stats as we talked about. I did look at the boards this week, and on the very top of the board was expected score, which has been there now for the last 5 or 6 weeks, which is really interesting. Then the next one was inside 50s, and then the next one was contested possessions. And I point that out just because they're the key messages that the players come out and see at quarter time, half time, and 3/4 time. So obviously the key messages that they want to give to the players at that point in time. The other one, just as I could see the board as well, I couldn't see all of the writing on it this time, but what I did see for the first time is the pressure indicator. So that the number of the pressure being shown to the players sitting on the bench during the game. And I'll come back to that a bit later in terms of why I think that's significant. So the disposal efficiency, I don't normally point this one out, but it was 74.5 to 75.3. So our kicking was actually a lot better today, notwithstanding some terrible howlers in that first quarter. But I didn't mention at the top how great it was to have a nice dry day with no rain and no dew, no slippery ball. Metres gained, totally critical stat for the Ds. So 5,369 to their tick over 5,000 for a plus 324 metres. That's such an important stat for Melbourne. Inside 50s is, as I said, is on the board. So it's obviously not just a key stat to describe our game. It's a key stat that the club uses, Goody uses, to tell the team where they're at. It was 61-38 by the end of the game, 23 differential, which is massive because I checked it it came up on the board at the MCG, 20 minutes first quarter, it was only 4 up. We were 4 up at that stage. So from that point, they really dominated the match. In fact, I think I've got a stat on we generated 27 more inside 50s after quarter time. So it was 51-24 after quarter time. So that's really a smashing. So what's that? 27 more inside 50s after quarter time, over double, outscoring the Hawks by 33 points, 67 to 34 during that period. So it just goes to show how important that stat is for us, inside 50s. And there's a question later, Andy, if you can remind me, Golroldi asked about our inefficiency, and it's just to remind me, it's directly related to that stat, inside 50s, and what that means for the forward line. Shots at goals, we had 12 more shots at goals. We contested possessions, was a touch surprising. They had 8 more, so -8 differential, one of the few times that we've lost that stat this year. Ground ball gets, we were -2. Intercepts was a critical one, but they got their share of intercepts. I feel like this week, though, it was more to do with our poor kicking than their pressure, but that might be a bit unfair on them. But certainly last week, Carlton got a lot of intercepts based on the sheer power and pressure they applied. So it was 69-63 for only +6 differential, which, that's why it's good to have the stats. I go to this every week and try to get my head around to the game via these numbers. Why that surprised me is because it looked like Lever had 30 odd by himself, and of course he didn't, but he had such an amazing intercept game. It felt like we were stronger in that space, and equally Melksham really shut down Sicily. So that I thought that was interesting. +6 intercept marks for us, so that's the Lever effect. Centre clearances, we were -2. Stoppage clearances -7. Really interesting. That goes back to that conversation we've had a lot over the last couple of years, is the value of clearances versus turnovers. Marks inside 50, +4, which was a great number for us. We've struggled with that all season. Tackles +13. We were up by about 5 halfway through that first. So even though it felt like a bit of an arm wrestle, I think we came to play in that sense. Tackles inside 50 was +2, which is a bit of a surprise because it felt there's been some criticism of Cozzy's game, and one of the areas he was better, was good, was pressure inside 50. So was Chandler. Defensive one-on-one loss, we only lost 28.6, and that won't surprise many, to 42.9 of their defensive one-on-ones they lost. So the differential's not sort of neither here nor there, but it's a fairly big one, 14. So nearly 50% of their one-on-ones they lost, and that's easy to miss because, that's pretty big. It's a pretty big number of defensive one-on-ones lost for them. Team pressure was a really fascinating one. So first quarter was 172, 173. What I loved was the second quarter, and I used the analogy last week of the rowing and upping our speed of rowing, our timing on that. And that's exactly what it felt like watching this game. It was like in that second quarter, even though we didn't get the scoreboard pressure, we lift our rating. We put them under pressure. It was 192 to 155. And I suspect, I haven't checked, but so that's a 37-point differential in pressure. And that's really, really unusual across any game, because normally, as I said last week, normally they're relatively tied together, the pressure, because the more pressure one team puts on, the other team either lifts or doesn't. So now they were still trying to chip it around, but that's a huge differential. 37 is massive. We didn't quite get the scoreboard advantage. 180 to 159 in the third quarter was equally impressive in some ways, because we came out. And so again, that's a 21 differential is really high. I don't think there would have been a differential in any game we've played either way, certainly probably not against us for 37. There wouldn't be too many either with a differential of 21. I felt like the last quarter we dropped it down a gear in the last 10 minutes, but still our rating, and that was 179. So I suspect if we could see a pressure gauge for the first 15 minutes or 10 minutes of that last quarter, it would be something like 185 to 190, and they couldn't go with us, which is no surprise for a young team. 167. Overall, it was 180, which is AFL average, so that's a pretty solid game of pressure from us, and 163 to them. And I think that was a huge factor, actually, in terms of how the game played out. Pressure, I think, has become a really critical number for the AFL and also for Melbourne, because it's what you see from the pressure is the contested possession. What you see from the pressure of the turnover. So you could say, well, we get more, we're likely to win when we get more turnovers. You don't get turnovers without your pressure rating being high. So in some respects, it's the central number, and it's understandable why they roll that, as Brenton Sanderson said, why they show the players the pressure rating during the game. Most pressure points. So the pressure points are weighed some. So the physical pressure acts are the highest one, closing acts the next one, chasing acts, and corralling are the ways that players can accrue pressure and pressure points. Jack Viney led all comers with 28 pressure acts, 60 points. His season average is 56. He's just a beast. Tom Sparrow was second. He's been terrific in the last few weeks. 23 pressure acts, 52 is pressure points. His season average is 44. Clayton Oliver again, and I forgot to mention last week, Clayton Oliver, he came back after 10 weeks out, and he applied more pressure than anyone in a Melbourne jumper has done all year by something like 30 points. He had something like 85 points last year. He was the second highest pressure, which is just phenomenal. He's backed it up this week. His season average is 57, believe it or not, so which is higher than Jack Viney. So put that into context. Clayton, so this time he was third with 49. Then these two next one are important, I think, in terms of the discussion about a small forwards. Cade Chandler and Cozzy were next. So Cade had 24 pressure acts and Cozzy had 22. So both above their season average. So impressive from that perspective. Time in forward half, again, important number. It's on the board. It was 50-50 in the first half, and it felt that way. again, like I said, once we up our rating, once we up our pressure, you can see it in a number of areas. One of them is time in forward half. So it went from correlation to our increase in pressure, 62% to 38% in that quarter, 70% in the third quarter. That's where we really, I thought, got on top. 70-30 in that third quarter, it idled back to 69-31. So massive, really. We spent 63% of the game in our forward half to their 37. That's just that's a Melbourne dream game for Goody. Turnover was the big one for us in terms of scoring. It was 58 points for, 36 to them. 23 to them. That's 35-point differential. It's really important to note that in the last 4 weeks, I think it is Hawks were the AFL number one in the last 4 weeks for points from turnover. So really important part of their game. But we smashed them in that regard, and we were brilliant. So 58 points is, again, that's Melbourne footy. Just a couple of points from defensive half. That was about the same as our season average. Just looking at centre bounce appearances, centre bounce attendances, I should say. I thought it was fascinating. 68% of the time Max Gawn was there, but the ruck contest, I should say. So the ruck contest, it was 71% for 52 contests for Maxi. This was the number I thought was really interesting. Jacob Van Rooyen, he went to 11 ruck contests, so 15% of the ruck contests JVR was at, which was a huge effort, I thought, and really surprised me when I saw those numbers. Just finally, the expected scores was almost bang on, 91-54 for a 27-point differential. So what's that, 37. All right, 91-54. So even more impressive on expected score. And just finally, the premiership metrics. Melbourne is currently ranked in the top 6 in all 19 of the premiership metrics and ranked number 1 in 7. A reminder that these are, and I'm just reading this from the Demonland from Willow Ratings, so thanks for this, Willow. A reminder that these are the metrics where at least 9 of the last 11 premiers ranked in the top 6 in home and away matches of the premiership year. Although not one of the 19 metrics, as he doesn't have data pre-2021, time in forward half is another important stat. And Melbourne is ranked second this year to Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide are really time in forward half game, but defensively weak. We've got the combination of being able to keep it in our forward half and protect ourselves from the turnover. Interestingly, here are the best quarter averages, average across all matches for time in forward half this year. Melbourne in quarter 4, 58.7. Melbourne in quarter 3, 56. Port Adelaide in quarters 2 and 3, 55 and 55. So what that tells me is we finished the game strong, and we have done all season, and we're continuing to do that now, which I think is super, super impressive. It was a fascinating game statistically. I thought it was a fascinating game tactically as well. So, yeah, terrific game.
Well, that's good. We did have a caller on the line and they've hung up. So if you do want to call back, give us a call. And just remember, we will answer the call, but we'll wait till there's a break in the conversation. So let's get on to...
Sorry, Andy, just one more.
Yeah, sure.
One more stat to...
Just one more
totally
thing.
overdose on stats, but I took a screenshot from this. So I'm going to use it for... So this was on the coverage from just before the game on KO. So I watched it when I got home from the footy. They were making the point that in the last... Let's have a look. So in the last 6 games in 2021... Melbourne were opposition with the ball when we've got the ball in hand. Opposition chain to score first. Opposition score per inside 50 first. Opposition defensive 50 to inside 50 first. And midfield intercepts first. So that was the last 6 weeks. Was it the last 6 weeks? Last 6 weeks in 21. We're first in all of those categories again this year. And their point they were making is it's looking eerily similar to 21. So I think if you went back and look at Wheelo's ratings about the premiership metrics, we would have been, at least similar 11 or 12 of the 19 premiership metrics in 21 as well. So it is looking very similar in terms of our defensive strength and a lot of those key numbers, contested possessions, inside 50s. So things are looking good from that perspective.
trying to make me excited for this final series.
Succeeding by the look of it.
Well, I'm very scarred by last season. It's going to take some convincing. One thing for me, like, I know we're a great team. I know all those metrics are looking good, but the one thing for me is that I don't think this whole season we haven't really put 4 quarters of footy together, and that's just the thing for me. Which we were doing in 2021. We had that little patch at the end of the year where he did play so well in sort of that before the last couple of games of the season. But
it's interesting.
We haven't put those block.
I reckon there's a question about that about this game, and I wonder whether it's partly how we're playing about the first quarter. So I might leave it for then, but I think there's, I've been thinking about that, and maybe there's some method to Goody's madness.
Maybe they're leaving something in the tank, but you don't want to do. Maybe they're doing that now, but finals, you don't want those slow starts because that can kill you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wonder whether part of the slow starts is tactical, but again, we'll talk about that when the question comes up.
Well, we've got George's tribute to Max Gawn. So before we get into the listener questions portion of the show, George has provided us with a clip that he prepared in honour of our 6-time All-Australian Premiership captain, Max Gawn, for his 200th game. So take it away, George.
After 200 games for the Melbourne Football Club and 6 All-Australian jackets, our Max Gawn is one of only 3 surviving Melbourne Football Club Premiership captains. Indeed, he stands in illustrious company alongside only 8 captains who have ever held aloft the Premiership Cup, and he shares the stage with the great Ron Barassi as the only Premiership captain to play 200 games. Max has always been a bit left of centre and a trendsetter in his own right. He was far ahead of his time when it was alleged he shared a Technicolor yawn on a China trip with he who shall not be named. Not long after, the Melbourne fans themselves were spewing over the same individual. He was also one of the first to sport a full hipster beard, not seen on the football field since the days of Bin Man's avatar, the great Gary Baker, and not to mention naming his first son George, which was a brilliant selection by any man's measure. Seriously though, it was Jim Steins who saw something special in this tall, lanky comedian and said, "This guy is going to be different. He's going to challenge the status quo." At 23 years of age, and after 5 years at the club, and with only 20 games under his belt and a couple of ACL reconstructions, it was hard to believe Jim could be so right. Now with 200 games for the club, this once gangly kid went on to amass multiple statistical records. Most hitouts in a season at 1,119, 6 All-Australian jackets, 4 times the most contested marks in a season, 3 times over 60 hitouts in a game. The list goes on. But for the Melbourne fans, his most memorable moments surely came in that 2021 year when he drove the side to eventual premiership glory. The winning kick for the goal after the siren in round 23 against Geelong to take the top spot. The 5 goals in the preliminary final to savage Geelong again by 83 points. And of course the culmination of holding the Premiership Cup aloft for the Melbourne Football Club after a 57-year drought. Finally, in the 165 years of the Melbourne Football Club, just 26 players have reached the 200-game mark. He set the mark for the tallest draft selection when he joined the club in 2011, but now he stands head and shoulders alongside the greats of the club after these 200 games.
Thanks for that, George, from afar.
That was brilliant. It sounded like we needed like a sepia video in 1964, our last premiership. Or
I mean, what a player, what a captain. What a career that's still going. Max will still play on for a couple of years, hopefully. And
you're a player sponsor. Yeah, how long have you known Max, Andy?
I've known Max. I think we became his player sponsor, I think either in his first or second year. I think in his first year. It was during the first year. We didn't know who he was. Our first player sponsor function, we got in there and we're sort of looking around for Max, and then we were told by one of the people running the function that he'd played in the twos that day, and that was one of the days he did I think the first time he did his knee.
That's amazing, isn't it?
You know, and then 2 knee reconstructions later, we thought, oh my God, what have we got here? And then look at that, 6 All-Australians, 200 games, premiership captain. We really hit a big getting Max Gawn. And, he's a great bloke. What you see of him being interviewed in the media, whatever, that is the Max Gawn that you get whenever you speak to him. Just a terrific guy. So, love him. And,
And he brought around the Premiership Cup for you all to look at.
He did.
And
he
marvel
did.
over after our win, huh?
He did. He came over. We had the whole family over. We had plenty of photos. So, got some time to spend with Max and the Premiership Cup. So I can't thank him enough for that. Top bloke.
And just a quick comment from me about Max is like Robbie Flower is on a completely pedestal by himself. So, but leaving Robbie aside is, Maxi must be close to the greatest all time, even Barassi in terms of what he's done for the club, what he's brought to the club. He tells an amazing story, Max, about Jimmy making sure that he got number 37 and then, of course, going to number 11 and being focused on being himself. I think one of the things that's really fantastic about Max in a football club environment, but also, at this point in time, is his emotional intelligence. He seems to genuinely engage with people, but he cares. He's just been both a wonderful captain, but a wonderful servant for the Melbourne Footy Club. And we've been around for, a long, long time, since 1859. So, to say he's one of the greats, I think that we should tip our hat every time we see him run out to play. And another fantastic year. What do you think? Do you think he'll make All-Australian this year?
Well, it doesn't look like it. They're fawning over Tim English this year, and Sean Darcy has been injured the last. I don't think he'll get it, but I'm not hearing Max in the conversation. And his year this year. I mean, he had the 4 or 5 weeks he was out early on, and the whole thing with Grundy, and took time away in the ruck for Max, and I think that's going to impact it. We saw once Grundy went out of the team, Max had that purple patch for a couple of weeks, but I don't know. Do they count finals in the calculations?
No,
I don't think they do.
I don't think so, but he deserves to be in. It'll be ridiculous.
He might get in the squad.
He's the best ruck in the AFL by the length of.
You don't have to convince me. I'm going.
Isn't he? So
I'm going on.
And his numbers stack up. So, he's had, particularly in the last probably 6 or 7 weeks, and I've said this many times about Maxi, I don't think entire time I've followed footy there's ever been a player who comes close to being as important to our team and arguably any team in terms of likelihood of us winning an individual match. Yep. He's just that important.
I just don't think he's getting the kudos. He's not the flavour of the week anymore, and he's not in any of the conversations I'm seeing. They have the rolling All-Australian team.
Just a given.
Yeah. We've got a caller on the line. Welcome to the Demon Land podcast. Who am I talking to?
This is Noah from Bentley. Love the podcast and great win from Melbourne on the weekend.
It certainly was, Noah. Nice to speak to you live in person rather than on a voicemail. How are you going?
Not too bad. Just got a couple of questions and just sort of points that I wanted to make. I've just noticed, I think over the last maybe 5 to 6 weeks, Melbourne has really showed their ability to come back from behind, albeit the Carlton game, which we won't talk about. Just wanted to know the guys' opinion on our ability to harness, the last sort of quarter where we've come back from behind, and what their thoughts are when it comes to September, how that will benefit us compared to other teams. The second point I wanted to make is if anyone noticed at the end of the game where Kate Roffey was on the TV with Tom McDonald, and he looked quite depressed and quite flat. Don't know if anyone noticed that. And the final question is with Grundy. I know you guys probably don't want to talk about it because it's been in the news a lot. Whether Melbourne really, whether we think getting rid of Grundy is going to fix the problem, that he's got, and whether just keeping him on having a bit of faith, because after the year before with Jackson and all that scuttlebutt in the news is going to affect our chances of winning the flag. I'd like to hear everyone's opinion on those questions, and go D's.
All right. Well, thank you, Noah. We'll get that. It's good because none of these questions have been tackled for our questions later on, so that's a good place to start. Bin Man, the first one, the come from behind, you sort of spoke about that. Do you want me to get, Bin Man, do you want me to get into the slow starts thing to talk about that, or the questions?
Oh, no, I think that it's an interesting question because I think it's definitely something that we've been strong with this year, and Goody's been quick to say that the sort of resilience, our ability to arrest momentum, it's become such a critical thing. It's a critical thing in any sport, to momentum, and it's obviously in footy. Interestingly, coincidentally enough, on the stats file thread on Demonland in Gorge Onion, who I do believe is with a mate, Ryan. G'day, Ryan. Go D's. Sitting in a pub in Coladina, down the coast. I was down not far away on the weekend. And he posted during the week that he places a lot of weight in a team's ability to arrest momentum of its opponents piling on goals. And so that there seems to be a pretty good alignment with a ladder as well. And I mentioned that was definitely a weakness of us in 2018. You know, we were offensively like Collingwood. We could score bunches of goals really quickly, but we gave up goals on, easily 4 or 5 goals. And I think that experience by Goody really sort of shifted his thinking, and maybe was the trigger for our defensive system. But it's something we've got so much better at, and we control the momentum, take advantage of it when we've got it, and I think so critical to make sure that the opposition limit the damage they can do when they have it. So 5+ goal streaks conceded in 2023. So this is when you give up 5 or more goals unanswered. On top of the reverse ladder, it'd be no surprise, West Coast with 23, then there's Hawthorn 16, drops down to 13, so it very much follows the ladder. The other end of the only wooden spoon that we want to have is the 5+ goal streaks conceded is equal Brisbane, Geelong and Melbourne. So only 4 times this year have we given up 5 goals or more in a run. And I think that's really critical to our success. Also goes to the point last week about our winning loss. Our average in our 7 losses, our average winning margin, losing margin is 10 points. That's very, that speaks to a team that is very good at stopping opposition getting a roll on. So even if a team like Port, for instance, they get on top, but they give up late goals. Not so much this week, but they certainly did against the Giants the previous week. I think they gave up 11 second half goals. There's Brisbane as well. We've been giving up late goals. Partly that's a fitness thing, but partly it speaks to a defensive weakness. So I think, that partly the answer to that question is the players' resilience, but it really is built on the back of our incredible defensive system. And if a team like Hawthorn go at it hard for 20 minutes and have the momentum and can only score 2 goals, that sucks the life and energy out of them. And I think that's a real important sort of tactically from Goody, and it played out in this game. If that was a Collingwood Pies game, once because it's such a ball in motion game when the Pies play, you're always risking the opportunity for a goal on the counter, just like in soccer. And so our ability to slow down the momentum is a big, actually slow the tempo of the game, I think is a really big factor in that. And it's definitely a big part of the way Goody coaches.
The other thing Noah asked was about Kate Roffey. I haven't watched and T-Mac looking flat after the game. Now I haven't watched the replay, so I didn't see that. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. And I don't know. Did you see the Casey game? Because I didn't see any.
I didn't. So I've got later of talking about the Casey game. So I'm not sure, and I'm hoping that it wasn't.
Well, because he kicked 3 goals, and so.
Well, I'm hoping there wasn't any injury or flare up of his. Injury. If he looked flat, I don't know. Noah were just going off what you said, so I'm not sure.
I think it looked like, from his expression, he's like, geez, these guys are good. I don't think I'm going to get a game, and might his last chance to maybe win a second grand final. That's the face that I sort of looked at when I observed it.
Well, we're going to talk about that, whether we think that we got some questions on T-Mac, whether he's going to get a chance. I think if this week is the week to maybe give him a go and see, we've got a bit of a free hit before the finals. So we'll we'll talk about that a bit later on. Big man, anything you want to add on Grundy, or do we leave that until the end of the season?
I'd say just don't believe the hype. Noah is like who's talking about him leaving Melbourne? Not Melbourne. So let's leave the media to worry about what happens to Grundy. He's a contracted player. I hope we keep him.
Yeah,
and I expect we will. That's the plan.
They're in the media. They're saying, "Oh, Sydney would want him," or they're saying Sydney. Well, of course, there's lots of teams that would need him,
and West Coast.
There's lots of teams. So, but nothing's coming from Melbourne. So, look, we'll see what happens with that. Anything else?
No, I think the only important thing is trying to get finals tickets. But I hope we all are able to get our finals tickets and cheer on the D's.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's going to be hard if we come up against Collingwood in that final. Be a lot of people wanting tickets, but that'll be a good thing, I guess, to play in front of a packed house. All right. Thanks, Noah. Appreciate the call. And
cheers, mate.
Thanks for your contributions through the voicemails.
D's.
Thanks, mate. Go D's.
Go Red.
All right. That was Noah from Bentley, a long-time voicemailer to the show. We finally got a live call in. Let's get into the first question. It's about our slow starts and how we reset this week. Bay Riffin asks, why do we start so poorly lately? In the first quarter, they switched the ball defensively with little bother from us to stand their players. We were just spectating and they came to play. Didn't the North game show us anything? We fixed this up mainly in the second half, but why aren't we covering the crosses earlier? Cozzy was meandering around and they just played Chinese checkers with our forwards with ease and ran the ball up the ground. Felt like under 12 stuff, thank God for A and B, as he always is alert for this. Trovy14 says, interesting game. Hawks came with a game plan that was working, but after half-time we made a plan for their plan and strangled their ball movement. Good win with our stars having quiet games. Red and Blue Beard adds, we seemed to strangle their chipping game in the last quarter. We didn't score too many ourselves, although we left a few out there. Presumably this bodes well for finals, especially against Collingwood. Is this the kind of Melbourne game we can expect in finals? Stu adds, Goodwin seemed to do a great job of finding the solutions to Mitchell's tactics. The short kick game was nullified by going 1-on-1, and when the Hawks tried to run and carry, we went back to our standard defensive formations. When they went back to short kicks in the third and fourth, we went man-on-man again. It showed great flexibility to change up the game plan and something we didn't see last year. Particularly pleasing how well the team ran out the game in the last quarter. Lots of smothers and tackles in the forward 50, even after the result was sealed. Buck Naked says, thought we got done early, but showed great maturity to adjust all of the in-game efforts of the Hawks. Rue Beauty asks, what is it with our slow starts? Earlier on in the year, we were one of the best first quarter teams. Why is it now taking 30 minutes to switch on? Lazy asks, did Bidman predict the future again with the use of tempo footy in the third? The Hawks were going hard and it seemed like we really wanted to take the sting out and make them do some running without the ball. So, B-Man, what did you make of our slow start and the Hawks controlling the play through their tactic of constantly switching, and then our ability to reset and nullify their tactics and wrestle control of the play back?
Just as a first thing is I've talked a few times this season about the falling into the trap of looking at each game in isolation, particularly as it relates to what happens come finals, as if it's a litmus test. You know, this game is some sort of litmus test for our finals chances. But equally, it's not in isolation from what's just happened. You might remember last week I was really, really bullish about the Suns winning, and it was my best bet of the weekend was the Suns to make their 13-point line. You know, they came out and went to town on the Blues. The game against the Blues, you know, was a week before was the most brutal game of football I think I've ever seen. All of the numbers showed it. It was 30-odd more tackles than the epic Port Adelaide Collingwood game. Port Adelaide, as I mentioned last week, and Pies physically have not recovered from that game. They had neither of them. Port are now getting back up to speed. They thrashed Giants and they look pretty good actually against Freo on the weekend. But Pies are still limping after that. But both lost their next two games. And, you know, I made this point so many times this season is, you know, fitness and fatigue is going to be one of, if not the factor, behind injury, I think the second most important factor, maybe behind system, in who's going to win the flag this year. And so the reason I say all that is that it cannot be divorced from the fact that we played such a hardcore game of footy just 7 days before. So there's that thought. The other thought I've had, because it's the same sort of thing came up last week against Carlton, is tactically, just the thought I sort of had last week is I wonder whether what Goody's doing a little bit this year is allowing the opposition to show their hand tactically and then responding to it. They did that with Carlton a bit. They sat off them a bit, and it's almost as if, this is a bit of a stretch perhaps, but, whether Goody's allowing the opposition to show him what they're going to do tactically, then respond to their tactics, and then look to, then at some point in the game, put our tactics in place. And I actually, there's a lot of talk about Mitchell and his tactical nous. And this is my point I was making before, is Goody flies under the radar tactically, but I actually think the Hawks made a tactical error, and a big one. So Mitchell said in his presser that they came in his post-match presser. Really urge everyone to listen to his pressers. They're terrific because he's really honest, and so is Goody in his own way. He said in that presser that they came with a plan to deny us the ball, hence the really high uncontested possession and mark numbers in the first quarter. But my take is we consciously allowed them to do that. We allowed them to play that way in the first because it suited us, because the very last thing we wanted was another brutal, energy-sapping encounter because we were still recovering physically from last week. So, I think Mitchell tactically made an error and should have come out hardcore like they were against Collingwood. So, because a bruise-free game is exactly what we needed. It's exactly what the doctor ordered for us. That's what the last thing we wanted is them smashing into us. So I think that was a tactical error by Mitchell. Their best chance was to come at us really hard early, and that's the exact approach that Suns took against the Blues. Knocked them off their axis a little bit, told them they were in for, they weren't going to go up to Queensland and have a cruisy game. The commentator said it feels like the Blues are still sitting around the swimming pool. That was because the Suns went hard. That's what the Hawks should have done. But I wonder whether, potentially maybe they couldn't because they were coming off a 6-day break and travel. They lost Jai Newcomb, which was a massive out, and we'll talk about that later. They also lost Lewis. So two of their most physical players they lost. And also perhaps Mitchell thought that spreading it around, chipping it around and forcing us to run and cover would gas us the way they did against the Pies. So they came, I think that was either the game after Port or the one after that the Hawks played Pies. And Hawks looked to do the same thing. They looked to spread the field really wide. The difference was they moved it forward a lot faster in that game, and they were much more physical. They were much more brutal. But they deliberately came in with a plan, knowing, of course, that Collingwood were gassed and still feeling it from the Port clash. And so that's, I think, what they tried to do in this game, but they didn't have that same brutality that they did against the Pies. And they didn't go forward as much as they did against the Pies. And I think what part of that was because we were so effective at moving our zone across, and the Pies don't have a zone like us. So if you watch the replay, which I did just before the show, is that we're just moving our zone across as they switch. We're happy often for teams to do that against us, which really told me it wasn't where fitness is in a really good spot, better than the Pies, because they couldn't do that. And partly they don't have as good a zone. So I thought that was tactically part of it. We allowed them to do that. As I said, they lost Jai Newcomb, which wouldn't have helped, and Lewis. But their drop in uncontested possessions in marks in the second quarter directly correlates when we lifted our pressure rating. So I mentioned that, I think it was 175 or something in the first. It went to 192 to 155. So we upped our rating in that. They couldn't match us in that quarter for pressure. As I said, a 37 differential, I would suspect, is probably in the top 4 or 5 differentials across any game this season for a single quarter. Certainly for us, it's probably the biggest. Nor in the third, when our pressure rating still was higher and they couldn't go with it. So we had 2 quarters of DNA Melbourne footy in fourth gear, because I still felt like we had another gear up our sleeves. And that increase in pressure allowed us to play the second and third quarters and the first third of the last quarter on our terms, like I said, the D's DNA, and all of our numbers started trending our way. The evidence, time in forward half went crazy our way. Contested possession started coming back our way, even though it ended up 8 down. Inside 50s was dramatically our way from that point I mentioned earlier. It was plus 27 from the end of the first quarter. And scores from turnover massively went our way. So in that period of time, it was our game. And then, that translated to improved territory, intercepts, and all of those things eventually. Scoreboard caught up with that, which is what happens. It's like that idea of that rowing thing of up our ratings. And then what I loved, this is the thing I loved about the game, in the last quarter, once we got that 3 goal, it felt to me like we're always looking to get that 3 goal margin. We dropped back to third gear once we got our 3 goal margin and allowed them just to go back to their chip it around mode, because they weren't going to win. The only way that they were going to beat us was to go forward. And we started doing the same thing for good measure, which I just loved it. I just loved the way we played, because that was how we were playing our best footy in 21, where we got that 3-4 goal margin. We talked about it on the podcast all the time, and then controlled the tempo and the of the game. And I thought we did that brilliantly. And I felt like it was really smart coaching from Goody, both from a tactical perspective, but I think really importantly in this, again, thinking of this game as part of our journey to finals, is the load management they were able to do. So there was a lot of talk about how quiet Track was. I haven't looked at his time on ground numbers, but I'll bet you bottom dollar that he spent a lot of time up forward. He didn't have a high pressure. I did look at his pressure; he was way down on the pressure chart. So was Gus Brayshaw. So a lot of players. Maxi had a pretty quiet game. Spent a fair bit of time on the bench, though they were able to give players a chop out, just like we did against North. And just a final thing on that, one of the great things about this season for us is, and it's really similar to the 21 season, another similarity is, unlike the Pies, who have had back-to-back 4 hardcore, brutal games of footy in a row, we had our patch of 3 games with Brisbane, Crows and Richmond that were varying degrees of intensity. Then we had North Melbourne to be able to manage our players. We had the brutality of the Blues game. Then we've got this game to be able to manage our players again. And then, we'll have a tough game next week, and may not be as tough as otherwise would have been given the way the results have gone. So that's a much easier run into the finals than what the Pies have got, who have still got another, they'll probably get over the top of the Bombers, but hopefully Bombers bring a bit more spirit than they did against the Giants. So.
Yeah, well, it looks like the Bombers need to win by 100 and they need GWS to lose by 100. So I don't think...
Well, no, I mean, surely, but this is the very definition. This is their grand final. And it's good in a way, because hopefully they'll be stung into action. I mean, what a nightmare result that was for them.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get on to the next set of questions. Smurf says, thought Lever had a terrific game yesterday, was marking everything and took a fantastic one-on-one mark when the game was in the balance. It really kick-started us. More of this, please. Whilst Tomo didn't have the best of games, do you think Lever's great game may have had something to do with playing 3 talls down back? There will be a lot of talk about the makeup of our forward line going into finals, but would love to get your thoughts on the makeup of our back 6/7, in particular whether we play 3 talls. Loving the podcast. Keep up the great work. Oh My D's adds, just how lucky are we to have Jake Lever at the Melbourne Football Club? His clutch one-on-one contest wins and strong on-field leadership were crucial in his great game against the Hawks. 19 disposals, 13 marks, 10 intercepts, 3 score involvements, 6 pressure acts, 322 metres gained. So Jake was sensational yesterday. Those stats that Oh My D's provided speak for themselves. Smurf makes an interesting point about playing 3 talls down back, which frees up Lever to play that intercept game. So, B-Man, in a moment, we have some questions on the makeup of our backline in regards to the third tall, in particular focusing on Tomlinson's game. So without getting into the who yet, how did you rate Lever's game, and do you agree that Lever needs that third tall?
Definitely needs the third. Well, not necessarily the third tall, just needs someone to allow him not to have a one-on-one or match, really. That's the thing. I was thinking about this afternoon in relation to the brilliance in some ways of Goody's defensive system. The thing that we've got that other teams don't have, or few other teams have, is, well, particularly when Petty plays, we've got 3 genuinely good intercepting marking talls. He's not in the team, so we've still got 2. And, most teams only have the one. And what that's meant is what they're now calling the diffuser. But the role that Melksham played on Sicily, it means that if they've only got the one, he's so critical to the way they play Sicily, the way they move it, transition it from the back half, the way, his intercept marking, that he's an excellent ball user. They want the ball in his hand. So if you can stop him getting the ball, you deny a lot of their you blunt a lot of their strengths. That's a big problem structurally. If one player is so important, there's a lot of talk about McGuinness's job on Oliver. Well, Melksham completely blanketed Sicily. We have the luxury of two players, so you could tag lever, which last in 22 they were looking to do, or maybe you have to then that frees up May. And the other one though that has really stepped up, and I reckon I know there's a question about it, so we'll talk more in detail later, but is Rivers. And it was really fascinating. McGuinness was sent to Rivers after he got taken off Oliver. Oliver went forward, which I thought was another tactical win. Oliver also took 2 ruck-outs, one of which he got a direct goal assist. He hit it straight down. I think Track might have got it and fed it out to Sparrow.
Sparrow's goal, yeah.
Yeah. So that was from a tab out. So he, I thought that was really interesting that of all the players that McGuinness could have been sent to, Mitchell chose Rivers, and that's partly because of how well he's intercepting marking and how important he is bouncing off the halfback flank. So, it's fantastic that we've got those 3 players. On Lever's game, I thought he just had such a brilliant game. He was back to his marking best. They all look super fit. He looks like he's trimmed down. He's moving super well. He's moving now as good as he did he did his knee. And he, I think he's so clever as well. He had a couple of big one-on-one wins, which he hasn't had lately, including a big spoil at a huge time. Well, actually, it wasn't a spoil. He marked it in the end, which created a scoring chain goal. We ended up scoring from that. So massive game. And it's great to see him in good nick. And just think, Andy, remember this time last year, he and Steve May were labouring at this time last year. So, for me, almost the most pleasing thing about the game was how fresh we looked. And it was another game where we were running out the game better than the opposition, including our big players like Lever and May.
Well, let's get into the back line and the third tall. D. Old Fart says, really looking forward to the pod as always, guys. Tomo found himself in no man's land far too often versus the Hawks and is treacle slow. I'm really worried about how he will hold up in September. On the other hand, he seems pivotal to freeing up Rick Lever to play his intercept role to perfection as he did on the weekend. Is playing Tomo a compromise that we'll just have to wear because he is our best available option? Prestige D adds, love the pod, guys. One of the highlights of the week for mine. Tomlinson, although having his colours lowered yesterday, is also a lock for mine. Plays a sacrificial role and allows Lever to do what he does best. On Brownlow night, when Lever gets the 3 votes from yesterday's game, he can thank Tomo for that. Titus Toddy says, I thought it was interesting that we took off Tomlinson given the game was still tight. Can we go into finals without him? I feel he's an important player as he can take a key forward and free up Lever. Big man, I'll get your thoughts on this in a moment, but first we have some thoughts on this from George, so I'll play that and then you jump in straight after that.
The back line, well, here we are again. The problems of whether we haven't or have even available a third tall raised its ugly head again on the weekend. Tomlinson was selected ahead of Hibbert, for example, to play this game, and quite frankly, it looked like a great big fail to me. He simply, in the first quarter in particular, opened up a hole because he wasn't playing at the zone defence that the team employs for Hawthorn players to quite simply walk around the back, and their first 3 and maybe even first 4 goals came as a result of Tomlinson just being completely out of position. Stephen May, I noticed, was not very happy at all with the circumstances and had strong words with him on a couple of occasions. It was no surprise to me that he was subbed out in the final quarter, and suddenly, if nothing else, the back line looked strong yet again, and intercept possessions for Stephen May and also in particular Jake Lever in that final quarter were absolutely critical it's all about the structure, and unfortunately, this experiment has failed yet again. We simply can't afford to have players who can't play in the role. When Joel Smith was co-opted to go down to the back line, he filled that hole beautifully. He knew how to play with the rest of the team, and the result was shown on the scoreboard as we're able to rebound from the defence without any problems. And Hawthorn was simply unable to penetrate the defence. More importantly, that's going to be an important factor going into the finals. So I'm afraid Tomlinson for me has run his race. I would much prefer to see Hibbert come back into the side. Although apparently from reports from some Demonlanders at the Casey game, he may have been concussed, so let's hope that's not the case. Disco Turner played his first game back at Casey, and do we really roll the dice and try him as the third leading up into the finals? That's a big risk perhaps, but once again, with the top 4 position locked in, this might be the very last opportunity to play something out of left field. So the rest of the back line looks nice and solid. As for you, in this game, Trent Rivers was an absolute standout alongside Lever in the game. He's becoming a huge factor for us in terms of his dash and long kicking from down the field. When we have a territory game that's so important in the way the game's played these days, he is a vital component to us, and his effect on the weekend was really sorely felt by the side. So if he keeps playing the way he does, it'll lead us to a lot more success come September.
It's a very, very confusing scenario, isn't it? So I've received an email from Charlie Spargo and Brodie Grundy to tell me, please do not predict that either one of them will be put into the team, because I've got it wrong all season. So I have the same concerns about Tomo as George, and increasingly, and it's a similar one I have to say with Brodie Grundy, that speed over the ground and acceleration over the first 15 to 20 metres is becoming critical. It always has been, I guess, for forwards and defenders, because you've got to be able to go with your forward of your defender, and you've got to get separation if you're a forward, which is where Smith has got Tomo, forward and back on both of them. But DL Fart's right. Like, if maybe you have to play him to be able to free up Lever and to free up May. The pace worries me. That's the thing that worries me the most. But maybe you have to, it's a bit of you've got to give a little bit to get a little bit. And turnovers are so important to the way we play footy. It's what I was saying before. Marking in our back half has been a hallmark of Goody's system. You don't get, if we're getting 5-6 goals a game because of them and only giving up 1 goal a game or 2 because Tomo maybe is not so quick off the mark, maybe that's where you play the percentages and he plays. I've been thinking about whether it's a matchup thing. Maybe he plays matchup. It depends who we play a little bit. So it's hard against Collingwood. They don't really have the second tall that you could probably get away with a Hibbert. I know that. I'm trying to think. We did play Tomo against Collingwood, didn't we?
Yeah, he had a good game and then got dropped.
Yeah, he had a good game. So look, it is really a vex one. I can see why he frustrates players, but I can also see the argument, to be honest. So I'm a bit torn. I can see the argument of freeing up Lever because Lever's not great one-on-one either.
No.
And to be perfectly honest, I don't like Smith back. I
was going to ask that. Is Smith a replacement?
I prefer Tomlinson to Smith back. He's much more athletic, of course. He's quicker over the ground. I don't think Tomo's, I don't think he's actually that bad one-on-one. He had good numbers pre-knee one-on-one. I think from memory, he was number 1 in the AFL before his knee for conceding the least number of one-on-one. He was that year's Quaynor. So I think one-on-one is not too bad. It's just that lack of pace, which can expose a little bit. But if that can be covered somehow, it's going to be fascinating. It's not, I think it can be read too much in that he was subbed off. because they were looking to get Shaki on. And how do you do that? You bring, you keep Smith on and put him back. We'll get to Shaki, which was a totally curious.
Well, Mike, just talk quickly about Shaki now because it's sort of tucked in away in the forward thing, and we'll probably miss it. But was it weird that Shaki was the sub? Why? I said to you after the game, we could have played him and to see if he can do anything. Why not play him the full game this week?
Well, I was trying to think, why would we have him for a sub? Because I cannot see him in the frame. I was shocked, to be honest.
That's why
I could have fallen off my chair.
Well, we used him, so why not play him the whole game and see if there is anything there? We've all agreed.
The reason why he was
I know.
a sub. So remember, going right back to the beginning of the year, we talked about Goody. He mentioned in an interview on the website before the season, asked about how he was going to use the sub. He said it would, tactically and load management. And I wonder whether this is an example of a bit of load management and protection. So Shaki's been rucking at Casey a bit. So I wonder whether you look at the numbers that I read out before that Van Ruin went to 15 rucking contests. I wonder whether part of the thinking was that if we could get a break on them, if we could get a 4 or 5 goal break on them early enough to basically take Maxi off and have Shaki and Van Ruin, or maybe Van Ruin's numbers, load management numbers. Remember he's a kid in his first season of AFL footy. We need Van Ruin as fresh as possible in 3 weeks' time, not for this game. So I wonder part of the thinking was to give them the chance to. I know that they didn't take Van Ruin off and they didn't take Maxi Gawn off, so that mitigates against that a bit. But I wonder whether that was part of the thinking and to provide some opportunity, to if Maxi was blowing up to take him off, or if Van Ruin was blowing up to take him off and use him that way as more as a load management than sort of with a view to giving him an opportunity to prove that he was in the frame, because I don't think he's in the frame, and it's a bit hard to be critical of such a short period of time, but there was a couple of contests where I thought, well, come on, it's a bit like Sam Wiedemann last year when he came in. It was like, come on, Sammy, you're playing for a chance to play in finals. Chase a little bit harder. Yeah. You've just come off the bench. You must be fit enough or fresh enough to chase a bit harder. Whether that's being unfair on him, but that's how it appeared. Like Van Ruin seems to be, he's like chases even when it's a dead contest, and I think that's the difference, isn't it? The will to win. So I thought it was really unusual decision, and that's where I landed in terms of the logic of it. I just can't see him being in the frame. I don't know about, what do you think?
I don't think he's in the frame at all, but that's why I was surprised. If you're going to have him as a sub, and I get your point about using him to give Max a chop out if we got up by enough, but I thought he's there. Let's see what he can do. I don't personally think there is. He was the Weed replacement, and we've spoken about Weed plenty of times.
But the other thing was a risk too, because if we had an injury to a runner early, if we, we were coming off the game against the Blues, if let's say a Sparrow would come off, or we needed to replace one of our half forwards or something, Shaki's, I guess we could have moved players around, but that he's not an ideal sub, is he? In terms of he's really only a one position player.
Yep, agreed. Let's move on. Jake Bowie. Scroll says, one of my favourite players is young Jakey Bowie, but I can't help think he's a little bit down on form and confidence in the past few weeks. He's usually a great disposer of the ball, but he's been panicky and turned the ball over a few times, which is very uncharacteristic of him. One such instance was at the beginning of the last when his handball missed the mark, resulting in the Hawks' first goal just seconds into the quarter, bringing them back to within 2 goals. In the third, he showed indecision and a complete lack of awareness, resulting in getting tackled and pinged, resulting in another score for the Hawks. By no means am I calling for him to be dropped, rested, or replaced, but something is NQR. Love the potty. Thank you for the wonderful. Thank you to you wonderful people for providing a respite for us D's fans from the bleating sheep in the mainstream media. So, big man, is Jake Bowie's form a concern for you going into finals?
It has been. He's been a bit off, and I was just looking at his numbers now, and if you'd asked me before, his disposal efficiency last week against the Blues was 50%. So he had
not like him,
6 kicks only. He had 4 handballs, 10 disposals, half of which didn't hit their target. And if you'd asked me what they were I would have said, oh, well, he probably didn't play that much better than he did against Blues, but he had 15 disposals and went at 80% for him. So,
Okay.
but this number, he only had 215 metres gained, which, compared to, for instance, 390 against North Melbourne the first time we played him, 425 against Richmond in the first time we played him, 384 against Adelaide, so he's 215, he only 159 metres gained last week after nearly 400 the previous week against the Blues. The reason why I think that's interesting is because maybe opposition coaches are denying him that run because he's become a really important deliverer off that halfback flank. And so that 80%, I might even go back and look on AFL.com on AFL stats. You can see the each of their involvements in the game. And I wonder whether that 80%, some of that's padded with chipping back and forward in the back line, because we did chip quite a lot in that last quarter and in the third quarter when we looked like we were trying to control the tempo of the game. He's made a couple of clangers. That's the thing too. He gave up a goal early in the first quarter, which was a bit unlucky, but a handball backwards towards our goal that got deflected, and towards the opposition goal, I should say, got deflected, and they scored. And he failed to bring the ball over the line in the Blues match, which cost us a goal. It is a worry. And so I was thinking about looking at who might come in and who might come out. Who does Hibbert come in? If Hibbert, who's he going to replace? So, I think but he's what we would miss though. They're different players. That's the problem. We miss his kicking. It is a bit of a worry, but, it would have, at the beginning of the season, you would think, well, he would not be at risk, and McVee is the one who's going to come out come finals. But
McVee's not coming
out of this side, can you?
No, he does some really amazing things. I can't see he's not Hibbert's not replacing Rivers. He's not replacing McVee. Obviously not Lever.
McVee's a lock, isn't he?
He's not.
He moves so well. Yeah. And that mark he took for a slight player, it was a really critical time too. It was one-on-one. It gets out the back.
Yep.
They've got a potential for a goal. He's the last, maybe the last player or second to last player between us and the goal. Critical time in the match, and just read it so well. Yep. And his ability. This is a bit of a stretch because how high I put Robbie on a pedestal, but he moves a little bit like Robbie, I reckon. That sort of graceful movement where he can move left and right, where and seemingly the opposition just watch him do it. So, so I think it's amazing to see he's a lock. But Jake, hopefully he can get back to his best, because Salo's also been down as well.
He has been, hasn't he? Really,
so
some of his disposal was awful.
They're our two players who hit targets off the halfback flank and don't miss those 20, 30-metre targets and make good decisions. Possibly opposition coaches have gone to town on those two players, knowing how important they are in terms of our transition. So perhaps they're applying more pressure than they otherwise would, which is maybe partly explain McVee's quality. And again, Rivers got attention, from Mitchell, obviously. So, I love good kicks, as you know. So, I think we can't really afford to take one of our top 3-4 kicks out of the team. We just simply can't, because you pay too big a price for a turnover now.
Speaking of Rivers, Singer says, shout out to one of my new favourite players this season, Trent Rivers. He's taken his game to another level this season and will make a real impact with his run, and makes a real impact with his run and booming kicks out of defence. Absolutely concur with that. Rivers is one of my favourites too. Said this many times before on the podcast. Rivers will be a 200 gamer for this club, will be a future leader of the club. He's had a fantastic year this year. He's got better and better as the year progressed. Big man.
I was said actually to someone at the footy yesterday, he's probably the only, McVee, of course, and JVR. So any player who hadn't played a game of footy, but for a team, they always say for teams to, have a successful year, particularly teams backing up from previous successful years, you need players who go to another level. And we didn't have that many last year, I thought, that went to another level. He's definitely one this year who's gone to a new level. And again, beating that drum. Mitchell said in his presser, such is his importance to us is why, McGuinness went to him. I think he's really everything that we wanted Hunt to be, that ability to run hard, collect, make good decisions, but get really good depth on his kicks, 50 to 60 metres. He's just been fantastic. That's about 5-6 weeks in a row where he's been in our top 4 or 5 players, I'd reckon. So he's having a breakout season he's probably already had, but he'd be top 5 in the Bluey, don't you reckon?
Yeah, I think he'd be up there. Don't have the Demonland player of the I haven't. I don't think it's been. It hasn't been updated for this week, or Whispering Jack might have done it already. But he was 9th last week, and I'll have a look while we're doing the next one. What his metrics were for this week, whether he would have definitely been in the vote, so he would have gone up. Just see, Whispering Jack has updated it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. He's gone up to 7th on the back of this. So he's Petrarca, Viney, Oliver, Brayshaw, Gawn, May, Rivers, Lever, Lockie Hunter, Cozzy Pickett, and Christian Salem rounding out the top 10.
And this season, just speaking to his season, he's played all 22 games. His time on ground 77% of time, so he's on there all the time. 386.3 meters gain. He's averaging. This is a really important one. He's averaging a tick over 20 disposals per match for a halfback flanker. That's a hell of a lot. That's good going. 20.5. I wonder whether he'd be in the All Australian squad.
Nah, I don't think so.
I don't know. He's averaging 6.3 contested possessions, so a third of his disposals are contested possessions. A third of his possessions. He's marking 5 times a match on average. He's only scored a couple of goals, so his average is 0.1. 2.3 tackles. Pressure acts 10.5, and just comparing him to Jake Bowie, the player ratings is a very the industry put a lot of weight and respect the player ratings. My understanding is it's so much so it's part of contracts and bonus payments and such like. He's averaging 10.3. His player rating this year, sorry, not average. His player rating, which is like a rolling window of I think over 15 months, I think, is it? He's 10.83 and Jake Bowie's 8.2. So, that's a relatively big gap. And I think from memory, Maxie's 12.2 or something. So just shows the sort of the level he's playing at this year.
Let's get on to Jake Melksham. And before we get into talking about Jake Melksham exclusively on Demonland, I'll be interviewing Jake on Wednesday morning. So sometime later in the afternoon on Wednesday, that podcast interview should be available. So check out wherever you get your podcast from, wherever you're listening to this podcast. That's where you'll find the Jake Melksham interview. It should be up on Wednesday afternoon. So look forward to that one. Deceiving says, an absolutely outstanding game from Melksham. He completely nullified Sicily, who was even run on the ball to try and get him into the play. Having seen this, and with Fritsch coming back in, can Jake still effectively play that defensive forward role on the opposition tall interceptor? Prestige D adds, surely Melksham has cemented his spot for the rest of the season, regardless of whether Fritsch, T-Mac or Grundy play again. He used to cop heat for putting on no defensive pressure and only being an offensive-minded player who was ineffectual when the opposition had the ball. But the role he has played this year, nullifying the opposition's intercept marker, has been a great transformation in his game and important going forward for the team. Travy14 says, I've long been an anti-Melksham person, but I think he's crucial now and he has been part of our team going forward, even with Fritter coming back. What's the panel's thoughts? Brew Beauty adds, Milkshake has become one of our most important players, kicks goals, should have had 5 yesterday, and his shutdown role on the opposition's best rebounding marking defender has been key. Well, few of us would have had Melksham on our bingo cards going into finals at the beginning of the year, but injuries have opened up a spot for Jake and it's given him the opportunity and he's taken it with both hands. He was fantastic once again in that defensive forward role. He kicked 3 goals, 4, could have had 5+ easily. He's held down the fort whilst all of our other forwards have been sidelined with injuries. And we'll talk about our forward line makeup next week and into finals with some key players available now. But first, Bin Man, your thoughts on Jake Melksham and his role yesterday?
I've always been a Jake Melksham fan in terms of his ability. I was always critical of him, for a couple of 2 or 3 seasons for his flaky tackling and pressure. He's totally sorted that. And he's gone from, again, I've been terrible with being accurate this year on who's going to come in and who's gone out. And, I would have, a few weeks ago, I would have thought, well, he'll come out. He's holding down Petty's spot, for instance, or, Grundy will definitely come back in because Goody wants 3 talls. And, the game's come to him a little bit because of this diffuser role that the pundits are talking about, and he's become the best in the business. So, he shut down who's the guy from the Roos that we talked about?
We talked about Aidan Core.
Aidan Core, yeah.
We talked about who else has he played on? We had a whole list of players.
Was it Vlosten or certainly, the Sicily? He wasn't on Wiedering last week, I reckon. No. There was the media was saying he was, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't on Wiedering. So he's done some brilliant jobs. But what he's gone up, where he's brought his game to a different level, and why he's a lock now is won that role. So every team that has a intercepting defender, every team has one. As I said before, we've got 2, which puts us in a huge advantage. But if we play Port, he's going to go to Alir. Everyone knows that. So I think that brings a lot of certainty, and everyone knows he's going to do a job. The other thing is
Harris Andrews.
There was a comment on whether it was in one of the questions, might have been DL Fard or someone else on Demonland, who said, can't recall him bashing into players so often. Like, he is seriously looking to hurt in the aerial contest. And hitting aerial, it looks like he's sort of half not going for it half the time. He really is hitting packs hard. But the key things in this match is that he had 3 tackles, which is brilliant. He also had 9 score involvements. He had more score involvements than anyone. Obviously, he had lots of shots.
Does that count the 3 goals for? Because isn't that 7 already?
So he had 2, but still he topped the score involvements nonetheless. By the way, just on that, Kristen Salem had 6. So he had 1 goal assist, Jakey boy. 4-3, but he also missed a couple. He had 9 shots, so 2 didn't make the distance.
Yeah.
He had inside 50s. He had the 3rd most inside 50s for the game with 5. Our second most for the Ds with 5. So, in fact, the second most for the game. Trent Rivers had the most, by the way, with 6. So, a fantastic game. His second highest rated game for the season. He's a lock, isn't he?
Yep, absolutely. Fritsch.
And I love his aggro. I have to say, I love his aggro.
Yeah, I like it too.
Especially when he's got the plaster on his, the boxer's cut, and he looks like a boxer. He looks every bit of the boxer that he is, and apparently he's a very good boxer, as Steve May can attest.
Won't be asking him about that one.
Are you surely you're going to have to ask him about ask him about his right hook. What's his favourite punch?
I don't think I'll be going down that route. Bailey Fritsch coming back possibly next week, or definitely seems like in the first week of finals. Obviously,
it sounds like he's going to come back full stop. Goody has been as unequivocal as you can get from Goody's stand. It's like normally so vague, but from my Goody reading the tea leaves, my constant effort to try and work out what Goody's actually saying.
We've got questions about the forward line in a minute, so we'll maybe tackle them then. But,
I don't think
Melksham's not going anywhere.
Because Melksham's now got a specific role. That's the thing. He's got a specific role. No one else in the team can play that role as well as he does. And as I said a few times, that intercepting defender has become such a critical way. Every team has one. Every contender has one good one. And normally just the one, if you take him out of the game, you go a long way to beating them. So, he's in, even last week he was quieter, wasn't a good night for anyone really, but in some respects for just how messy that game was. I don't mean it was players didn't play well. So he's got that role, and no one is going to be able to take that role off him at this late in the day.
Let's talk about the versatility of Joel Smith. We have a voicemail from 3183D in regards to the versatility of Joel Smith. So I'll play that and then get your response. Jump in once that's over. 3183D.
Good evening, lads. It's 3183D here. Hope you're well. Loving the pod. I just wanted to bring up 2 points from yesterday's game. sort of connected. The first one is I'd really like to say how well I thought Joel Smith did yesterday. He gets quite maligned, but his effort was absolutely fantastic, I thought. Really going at the contests, and he does what we actually expect of Ben Brown, which is if he can't mark, then he brings the ball to ground in a way that the crummers can pick up. He also goes in really hard, so I think he's actually could be turning into the sort of the find of the year in a way. The other point I wanted to make was how I thought it was a great move by Goodwin to move Joel Smith back to sub him when he subbed Shaki on for Tomlinson. And it was really noticeable in the last quarter how the strategy changed with that real lockdown of the forward half, with May pushing up further, May and Lever both pushing up further. And Joel Smith's ability meant that he could be the goalkeeper at the back to mop anything up. So I really enjoyed yesterday's win, and really looking forward to the finals and to seeing how it sort of pans out with Smith back in the team in his varied roles. All right, guys, keep up the great work. Speak to you. Bye.
Yeah, it's a great call. Well, just add it to my list of predictions, the selection predictions that I'm likely to get wrong, because all season I've been, well, since Smith has come into the team, I've said that he's the perfect sub, and
yeah, but he was the perfect sub, but then we had Petty go down with injury, so had Petty stayed in the team, Smith might have been still that super sub.
So the question mark I have on Smith is, can he go back? I don't like him back. So I 3103 is completely correct. I thought he was brilliant, and he's right in a way that that's a tough call playing that sweeper role, because then you are one out. It's just you, and you're the one in the spotlight, and that's why his pace is so important, and that's why Tomlinson's pace is a worry, because you can't play that role and be slow, because you've got to cover too big a territory. You're covering a big zone. If they get it out the back, if they change lanes and bring it in a different way, you've got to be able to read it and get across. And even if you read it well enough, you've still got to sprint to be able to get across and make a spoil if they're bringing it in, that tic-tacking, the ball tic-tacking down the ground the way it does. He also pushed up really high a couple of times and made some spoils to trap them in, to keep it in our forward half. And to trap the ball in our forward half, tracking his forward all the way up the ground and getting spoil. And that's on the back of incredible athleticism. So for me, what he brings is his athletic ability is sort of, it's like a backhanded compliment sometimes, isn't it? But he is brilliant, and it's become so important. Like he's quick, he's genuinely quick, and he's also super fit. So he can do some of the kilometres that all team defence needs. That Tomlinson's super quick too, but the difference is Smith's got fast striding speed, so he can run 100 metres or 8 metres at a pretty good clip after accelerating quickly. 3103 is complete right on the money with Brown-like ability to bring the ball to ground, and it was a really critical moment in the game actually, because Melksham had missed a couple of very gettable goals for a player of his ability, and quite frustratingly as well. And the goal that he got was pure and simple from Smith not giving up in a contest, an aerial contest, the one that he booted off the ground, from 20 metres out, which was a beautiful goal from Melksham. But that was only because Smith got a late hand in and brought it to ground. And it was
I'm just watching it on the homepage of Demonlands, the video of the week, and I just saw exactly what you're talking about. He extended one arm up and just got it on, and it came down beautifully for Melksham.
And of course, you hear that all the time, is that's their job, and it is their job. But like that would have been so easy, though. I forget whoever their number 7 is. Was just about to swallow that mark. It would have been another intercept mark for them. He got to that contest from a fair way off. That's his speed. He used his jump to be able to get to it and just make enough of effort to bring it to ground. But I thought his kick. The other thing was his goal that he kicked. Which was a beautiful bit of play, and you love when they kick the goal after a beautiful bit of play.
It's a good, nice straight kick for goal.
Oh, it was such a good kick after the goal he threaded from the boundary last week. So
similar position, I think, further out.
Forward. Does he stay in the forward?
Well, that's the question. We're going to talk about forward line in a sec, but we're talking about Smith now. Fritsch coming back. Melksham's a lock for the team. Van Ruwen's there. Question mark on T-Mac. We'll talk about him in a sec, but does that leave a spot for Smith up forward?
Well, I wonder whether there's some, the idea of having Tomlinson in, even like deliberately bringing him out at 3/4 time when the game needs more, when it's a battle early on, you have your Tomlinson, and as the game opens up and his lack of pace maybe gets exposed, that's when you take him off and you've got Smith up your sleeve that you can throw back and you lose nothing. In fact, you gain because everyone else is slowing down and you're injecting a player of his athletic ability and speed in the back line. So maybe Goody's trying something, in that space, and maybe that's what Shaki was about as well. But yeah, it's a real conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, with players coming back, it's a good problem to have rather than players going out, and that's who's going to replace them. Let's talk about the forward line now. We have a couple of general comments about the forward line going forward, as well as some comments from George. I'll read out all the comments and questions first, and then I'll play George's little clip about the forward line, and then B-Man, you jump in with your 2 cents. Rue Beauty says, do the panel think we could play a forward line of Smith, Fritsch, Melksham and JVR as the only real tall? I don't think T-Mac, having missed so much footy both this year and last year, will be the hero a lot of supporters are pinning their hopes on. Travi14 says, I watched T-Mac in the VFL today and think we need to have him in. We can't have Petraka, Sparrow and Melksham taking ruck contests in the forward line. T-Mac played very well, led up and presented, kicked 3 and took a few marks. Played the exact game we need from him at AFL level. Does he come in? The only issue we have is when Fritter comes back, we can't have T-Mac, Fritter, Melksham and Smith in the same team, as we've just discussed. Lazy adds, have we missed the try T-Mac to see how it goes boat? I know Travi said earlier he was decent in the VFL, but I feel that every selection from here on in won't have room for experiments. Bigfoot says, wondering what the panel thought about the selection of Shaki and then the use of him as a sub. I would have thought it would have been a good opportunity to get a look at him for a full game on the eve of finals. From what little we've got to see, it's a no from me, but I guess the footy department knew what they were doing. We've already talked about that. Deceiving says, having seen Smith forward and back and Tomlinson back, it seems Smith is the better option over all of the two. Tomlinson out, Smith back and Fritsch in seems an easy change. Does that leave us too short, small in the forward line, or is the speed and agility potential an advantage? Supreme Demon says, we still seem to be tinkering with our forward line, seeing as he played well at VFL level, kicking 3 goals. Should we bring in Tom McDonald against the Swans? Where do we find room for Bailey Fritsch? I thought Joel Smith had an excellent game today. He's the ultimate swingman playing up forward and in defence. Where do you think his preferred position is? I think he is an ideal forward pocket. D. Old Fart says, T-Mac playing a solid game for Casey on the weekend is only his second game back from an extended injury break. Fritter seems likely to return for the Sydney game and is an automatic selection when right. Melks has been excellent as a defensive and goal-kicking forward in Fritter's absence. Joel Smith adds something different to our forward line with his pace and attack on the ball. Given that the Sydney game is our only dress rehearsal before the finals, who plays and who misses out next weekend? I don't think we can play all of them together in finals. I'll now play the audio from George about our forward line, and then Big Man jump in straight after that with your thoughts. Forward line.
The Melbourne forward line. Well, this has been a topic of conversation for pretty well all the season, and here we are in round 24, and we're still talking about it. As the coach said in his post-match interview, nothing's off the table. But the reality is that we haven't had much on the table in the first place because of the hand we've been dealt with by the injury gods in particular. Don't need to tell anybody that we've had no T-Mac, no Fritter, no Ben Brown for months on end in the season. And while we thought we had a solution in Harry Petty, that fell over as well. So for the last considerable time now, we've been filling holes. But the good news is that we sit at top 4, which is now locked in for the finals. Jake Melksham cemented his spot in the side and has produced some winning efforts up forward. Also, Joel Smith looks to have found a nice hole in there as a second tall in the absence of all the others. And of course, Jacob Van Rooyen, who we thought would play limited time up forward this season, has turned out to be forced to play considerable amount of time, and is a lock for, not only for finals but probably for the long-term future as our full forward. In the background, we've got the hope of T-Mac, who played his second game down at Casey and kicked 3 goals. Fritter, according to the coach's post-match interview, once again will be a player this week. So hopefully, even though it's round 24, we actually might have the opportunity, not having to win the game necessarily in Sydney. We might have the opportunity to see whether these 2 players, at least in T-Mac and Fritter, are able to fill the holes that we need up forward as we enter into the final series. One concern we have with the forward line, it's been watching for a couple of weeks, and it's probably a nature of the lack of tools that we have up there, is the setup at centre bounce. We continually have 3 smalls sitting at the traditional half-forward line. When the ball comes out of the centre, it's never a free-flowing activity. There's always a short, scrubby kick of some sort. And like in this game, Hawthorn just set Sicily up at the traditional centre-half back position, and with his height and skills, there wasn't really much competition, simply because we have people like Cozzy, Neil Bullen, Chandler and Bailey Laurie, who are not over endowed with height. So unfortunately, we keep losing these scrubby kicks coming out of the middle at critical times. So I'd like to see us move one of the 2 forwards further up the ground. We currently are playing, for example, on the weekend we were playing Smith and we were playing JVR, both in the goal square. Unless the players in the middle come out of the ground and kick 75 metres, the ball's never going to get to the tools. So I think some adjustments needed there. There's a little bit more with the forward line. I think the back line situation also has problems, and that will affect the forward line, but we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the back line component as well.
Well, we already talked about the back line, George. Get with the program.
Yeah, get with the program, George. What did he say? Is not over endowed with height. That's a very polite way of saying short.
Well, I don't think Bailey Laurie's in the team as a key forward.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Bailey Laurie, because I know there's a question about Bailey, and I won't talk about his game because we'll answer that question. But he's in the mix in terms of the selection, because I mentioned last week I was sure Spargo was going to come back in based on the game he played at Casey against Carlton. Now, Laurie came in, which surprised me, but he came in and playing exactly the same role as Spargo would have, which is the high half forward role. I listened to Uze be interviewed on ABC Radio about 20 minutes before the game started as I was walking to the ground. He was asked about Bailey Laurie, said that, he really had played 20 weeks of consistent good footy at VFL level, and he'd earned his call-up, and that the role he was going to play explicitly was the high half forward role. That's Uze's word. So he came in to play that high half forward role that I've talked a lot about this season, that we played the clip from Daniel Hoyne to define what that is. The player that gets up and down the ground and is key to the defensive running. Laurie came in to play that role. Now, why it's relevant for this conversation is that if Fritter comes in and Smith stays, a forward's got to have to come out. It's hard to roll through, and maybe that would be Laurie. And but you give up Laurie or Spargo. If Spargo might come in and replace Laurie, I don't think that will happen. I think Laurie will keep his spot, and deservedly so. But then you lose a high half forward, and that's a problem because the high half forward plays a critical role in an all-team defence. All players do. All players have to run and gut run all game. But when an opposition do what Hawthorn do, they're trying to pull apart an all-team defence. And it's the gut runners who cover the ground. So if a Bailey Laurie can gut run across and stop a switch, no one sees it if the opposition can't make that switch and instead, as happened in the second and third quarter, kick down the line to a contest and it comes back the other way because we intercept market. No one notices that it's because of the work the high half forward's done in Laurie, and our other athletic runners are Langdon and Hunter play a key role. So it's Nibbler, Langdon, Hunter, normally Spargo, but now Laurie, who play that key running role. Now, if you take Laurie or Spargo, whoever it is, out of that mix and replace it with another tall, Fritter can't do that. Smith might be able to do that because he's so fit. And then Chandler needs to up his kilometres that he might run. And I think that's what happened, as I said last week in the Blues game. We're exposed a little bit in terms of their ability to transition the footy, and a little bit in this game, but it didn't really get hurt on turnover. But Chandler, we want him closer to goal. So he's what is called a speed forward, and your speed forwards are Cozzy, at Casey, it's AMW, and of course Chandler. But Chandler's been playing a hybrid role. You know, he gets up and down the ground too. All players get up and down the ground. When you look at when the ball's pressed up in the opposition's defence, or in our forward line, all 36 players on the ground are in that area. So the question mark about that high forward role is going to be really interesting, because if you keep Smith in there, you've got to have someone out of that forward line. If we've agreed that Melksham's not going anywhere, then you've got to take out a Laurie potentially, or a Spargo, in which case someone's going to have to cover those kilometres, which loops all the way back to T-Mac. And I can't see how T-Mac can come in terms of his inability to cover the ground. Like, it's not just having a marking forward anymore. Goodwin has long been wedded to this idea of the third tall. But if T-Mac can't cover the kilometres that he would at his best, I don't think he can come into the team, particularly if you lose that high half forward role. So it'll be a fascinating selection this week. But I just urge, Goody's said this a lot, and he said it in his presser on the weekend, is the season starts again. It's a new season. You'll hear Goody say this multiple times, is that the finals is a new season. So I wouldn't see this game against Sydney as a dress rehearsal. For no other reason, we've got a bye, and also the SCG is so small. So, it's got some weird permutations, this game, because we may not need to win it. For instance, Sydney may not need to win it. It's on the SCG, which is a joke of a ground as well. It's a postage stamp, so what does that mean? Can you afford to bring in an extra tall? So, there's a lot of complexities in what could happen. So, it'll be fascinating to see, but more fascinating to see first week of the finals, that's for sure.
I think Sydney do need to win it. They might not be able to jump St Kilda if St Kilda win, but there's they might not want to play. Like, GWS could win, and they won't know that in our game.
Well,
so
we'll know that game.
We'll know our permutations, but I don't think they'll be fully.
I think if Saints get beaten, they're in. I thought Sydney were a lock. So
Sydney are locked for the finals, but they could get if St Kilda lose and Sydney win, Sydney get a home final against St Kilda. I'm sure they'll want a home final against St Kilda. If they lose, they potentially play St Kilda here at the MCG,
right, so or
they play Sydney. Carlton if GWS win. And I don't think they'd want to play. I don't think they'd want to be playing Carlton at the moment. So right. I think for them, a win is the most preferable option for them. Not that they'd probably want to lose anyway.
So you're right. I mean, I hadn't considered. So they're playing for something meaningful.
They are. They're playing for a home final, basically. I think if St Kilda win,
the great irony will be, Andy, is if we end up playing the Pies first week of the finals, because of that, we play at home at the MCG against the weekend Pies, which would be my number one.
Well, we're going to talk
choice
permutations
because of the Petrarca shambles. That would be sweet irony.
Yeah. Well, you make an interesting point about if Fritsch comes in, a high half forward might have to come out. But then
you could cover at the SCG because it's so
small. Well, that's the SCG.
So
I'm talking about
less of an issue.
I'm talking about finals as well. But so Fritsch is going to come in, so someone's got to come out, and it might be that high half forward role, which could cause a problem. But that would almost mean that T-Mac's not going to come in, because then who comes out as well?
T-Mac won't come in this week. I won't. get it right.
So can you see T-Mac coming back in?
Can
Can you see T-Mac coming back in at all then? I doubt we're going to bring him back in the finals.
I can't. I mean, we've got
barring injuries.
We've got Smith, who I think everyone's made a good case for him staying in the side as a forward, but I can see Smith going back, Shaka coming out, Smith going to the bench, and Spargo coming in for Laurie, or Laurie stays, and Fritter coming in to that mix.
We'll talk changes a bit more later on. We're going to talk about Cozzy now. Red Jacket says there's a thread on Demonland discussing whether Cozzy stands up in big games on the MCG. From Demonland poster Stewart's post on the subject, he says, I understand goals aren't the only metric, and no forward pocket is one of the hardest positions to play. Some of the statistics are actually quite damning, though, and admittedly a small size, and my stats may be dodgy here and there, but Pickett has kicked 3 goals or more 16 times in his 81 AFL career. Only 4 of those bags occurred at the MCG, 2 of them back-to-back in a hot streak in 2022. Pickett has kicked 4 or more goals 4 times in his career, 3 of those occasions being in the Alice, the ACT and Tasmania. Pickett's average, including his first season, is somewhere around 1.5 goals per game. Meanwhile, against the 3 biggest clubs in the country who we have key matchups with, Collingwood, Richmond and Essendon, Pickett has kicked a grand total of 9 goals from 13 games. I don't think he has ever kicked more than 2 when the crowd reached the 70,000 mark. So the first question is there an issue or just a statistical anomaly based on a small sample? Second question, if there is an issue, what can we do to fix it? And third, is there something about the MCG which delimits Cozzy's input perhaps? So that was Stewart's post and my question, and this is who's talking here. This is Red Jacket. So Red Jacket's question is very similar to Stewart's. I absolutely adore Cozzy. He can be exciting and electric and is a huge draw for the club in terms of marketing, but his consistency is a big drawback in his game. He goes missing in matches, and just plonking him in the middle at the start of quarters as a shock troop only provides a momentary spark. His greatest strength is his speed and agility, which makes him an ideal candidate for more midfield minutes, with his excellent ability to evade opposition and use his skill to break through defences and create scoring opportunities. Now, George has some thoughts on this, and I'll play that, and then B-Man, you jump in with your take.
One of the things that perhaps became very noticeable in this game against Hawthorn was the tiredness that seems to be across all the players now. That's perhaps not surprising given that it's a very, very long season and we're at the end of it. But certainly it was very noticeable in this game. Keziah Pickett had 5 disposals for the whole game with only a 20% disposal efficiency, so effectively he had 1 touch for the whole game. He looked like he was nowhere near his best, and it's not surprising because while it's his 3rd season now, the guy's still only 22. And when people call for him to be used in the centre a bit more, perhaps that's also a reason why we shouldn't be. That playing in the middle is a really brutal, tough, hard role, and if a smaller player is being expected to play minutes in there, then he's not going to produce his best, and perhaps we've been too ambitious with the way that we have used him in the past couple of weeks. Neil Bullen even couldn't kick the distance from 35 metres when kicking for goal, but he wasn't the only one. Christian Salem, whose kicking is normally quite lethal and accurate and precise, could barely get the distance as well when he was using the ball. At the moment, he looks like he can barely make a 40-metre mark at the best. Unsurprisingly, Christian Petrarca, to me, looks like he might have a shoulder problem. He wouldn't lift his left arm above shoulder height a couple of times. But again, he's one who's been playing in virtually every game, and the season's getting very long for the midfielders in particular. Fortunately, we've got the ever-reliable Jack Viney in the middle, who seems to be completely indestructible, and it doesn't matter how long the season goes on, he seems to be in there at the very best. But I think there's a number of players, and we're not the only side in the competition who's in the same position, that the finals bye cannot come fast enough for us. The fortunate thing, I think, is that the majority of these players are not carrying serious injuries. They're not out with hamstrings and other injuries which cost you games. They're just plain tired. So looking forward to the break for them, and I think we'll see the best of them once we get into that final series.
Yeah, I mean, definitely playing tight in the sense that fatigued from a big block of games, but particularly last week, I keep coming back to how brutal that game of footy was. And remember our conversation, our interview with Selwyn Griffith at the beginning of the year about the toll it takes to a game of footy and how much the full week is designed for around recovery and how little aerobic work that they can do in that week. Now, we had full 7 days, but that was an off-the-charts pressure game. Again, that's why I was so confident the Suns would push the Blues, and it's exactly what happened. They were gassed as well. All teams are really struggling this year. If you think of the season like a game of footy, we're in red time in the last quarter, and red time's when it gets tough. And a really critical thing that's now going to come into play is this round is an additional round of footy than ever's been played. So it's this now. We've now got to what would have been the end of the season for the last, 6 or 7, a long time, whatever, when the last team came in. So we're now past red time. It's into extra time now with this extra week. So a lot will come down to which club has managed themselves best. And I reckon we're in terrific shape. I think George's right. We don't seem to be carrying the injuries that we so evidently were at this time last year, whereas other teams look really seriously banged up and have got the telltale bandages. On Cozzy, I think that, it can't be underestimated, the pressure. Like I keep coming back to it. It's hard to see. It's hard to understand the importance of it, but his KPIs aren't goals. I know that's frustrating for fans. That's how they judge him. The questions are framed that way in his he only had 4 or 5 possessions in this game. That is true, but he had 22 pressure acts. His season average for pressure is 42. So George's point's correct. Everyone is tiring a bit, but you cannot apply. His season average is 42. His pressure points in this game was 48. So it was above his season average for this game, and it was critical. His inside 50 pressure was critical in this game. It can't be underestimated. That's what Goodwin would probably say if asked. The pressure is what we're looking for. By way of comparison, he had 22 pressure acts. Max Gawn had 7, and we talked about how well Smith is, how athletic he is, and how quick he is. Joel Smith only had 8 pressure acts in this game. He's averaging 18, so it was well down. So he's 8 pressure acts, 18 pressure points. So well down, way less than Cozzy. In many ways, a pressure player. Our other pressure player, who we just gave a big pump up for, is Melksham, and the pressure he's applying and how hard he has been at the footy up forward. He had 13 pressure acts to Cozzy's 22. So, I think that can't be underestimated. That's what Cozzy brings. Of course, we'd like to see him kicking more goals. But the other thing is he's a young player. It's easy to forget. How old's Cozzy? He's 21?
Yep.
22. So, he's a real young player playing a real difficult position. And his player rating is up near 10. So that's really very quality possessions. Half of his possessions are contested. So he's averaging, what is it? Let's have a look. He's 50%, just nigh on 50% of his possessions that he wins are contested. So he's a pressure player. He's hard at it. But George is right. He needs to freshen up. The whole team needs to freshen up. So I don't think that's probably a fair sort of criticism of him that he doesn't stand up in the big games. There's been plenty where he's been a defining player in the match, I think. But more the point, I don't think that his performance is based on goals by the club.
Well, let's get on to Bailey Laurie. Royal Demon says, I was a bit sceptical when Laurie was picked over Spargo, but I thought he did a few really nice things and took his chances and had a hand in a couple of goals. Happy for him to get another look in before finals. Supreme Demon says, thoughts on Bailey Laurie's game against the Hawks? I thought he did a few positive things, a couple of good kicks, as well as a great tackle in the centre of the ground. So I too raised eyebrows when we selected Bailey Laurie. I haven't watched much of him at Casey, but I thought that Spargs was way ahead of him, probably because you gave that ringing endorsement, big man. I thought he was up in the pecking order, but Bailey did quite a few nice things, and considering it was his first full game and next week is, for all intents and purposes, a free hit, why not give him a crack? 14 disposals, 2 goals, 2 inside 50s and 2 score involvements. Only 57% disposal efficiency, though. B-Man, anything you want to add to what you said before?
Yeah, I thought it's really hard to know how to judge those roles because, as I said, what they will be looking at playing that high half forward role is his kilometres run and how many times did he stop them switch, for instance. How I wondered a little bit, that all-team defence requires a sophisticated understanding of where to go, where to run to, particularly in that high half forward role. He's not been playing that role at Casey. He's been a mid at Casey.
Yep.
So, it's not like you can plug and play suddenly, go there, run there. Nibbler was giving the wings a chop out at times. So, there was a few times where they looked like there should have been someone covering an outlet kick and there wasn't. I'm not saying that that's necessarily him, but that's what happens when you get new players in. So the way they would look at his game would be partly through the lens of his GPS numbers, which we don't have access to. So how far he's run, where he's run to, how many times did he stop a switch, those sorts of things. I all power to him. I thought he played all right. It didn't blow me away. Did a couple of nice things. A really nice banana kick that set up a goal, I think, or maybe a missed shot. But then he moved pretty well. I thought tackled well. Maybe one of the thoughts I had was that perhaps they're not going to go with the high half forward role, and this is a straight swap. Give him a chance to have a taste. We want to re-sign you. We're committed to you. We think you've got a place in the future, a bit like with Wowie. And then maybe it's a straight swap for Fritter, in which case then Chandler and others have to cover those kilometres that higher forward role would do. But with Smith in the team, you can do that, I think. He's athletic enough to cover ground himself. So maybe it's as simple as that. He drops out this week and it comes in for him.
I saw Nibbler at one of the breaks they were both on the half forward flank area, and Nibbler was sort of pointing to areas. Must have been sort of bit of tutorial on the ground in-game training, just showing him where to go or what to do and all that stuff. So that's good to see. Speaking about
just on Nibbler, what a game! Fantastic effort by him, gut running.
We're going to talk about him right now. Radelaide says, B-Man, really appreciate the shout out you gave Nibbler the other week on the podcast for his 150th game. He's one of my favourites. Never understood why he's maligned by many fans. He plays a crucial role in the team, and I'm glad you were doing your best to relay that to Demons fans who only look at kicks and goals on the stat sheets. However, how does a player not make the distance from 40 to 45 out from goal? We can't afford that in finals. And he wasn't the only one who didn't make the distance from 40. Cozzy didn't. I think maybe Melksham, definitely Salem.
Twice.
And there was
Hunter twice didn't make it.
Yep, there were one or two others. So big man, George has earlier said it was due to tiredness, maybe. Is that, do you agree with that? And then
it could well be. It could well be. I mean, last week's game would have taken a hell of a lot out of him. Nibbler's numbers, by the way, were way down on pressure, so he was probably fairly fatigued they would have been fairly fatigued from last week. I've got a theory that at the MCG in those late games, when it starts getting cold and dewy, that the ball doesn't travel as far. So that's my theory, is that simply the heavy air, heavy atmospherics, because that's what I'm thinking. Or a flat ball. We've just unluckily got 6 flat balls kicking for goal.
I saw a few Hawthorn players easily make the distance, so they were using the same balls. So I don't know.
Did you though?
Well, they did. A first gamer comes on and he's able to kick those distances. Scoring efficiencies from inside 50s. Go Lordy says, hello to the panel and congratulations on the consistently excellent podcast you give us each week. I've been looking at our efficiency in front of goal, and the stats show we are pretty average. From 61 entries, we scored 13 goals on Sunday, or 21% of the time. The Hawks achieved 23%. In the game against Carlton and North, we were equal with the opposition at 17% and 22% respectively. Like the Hawks, the Tigers were more efficient than us, 33% versus 27%. The last time we were better than an opposition was in the Adelaide game, 27 to 24% efficiency. I'm not sure what to make of this except to draw the obvious conclusion. If we have more entries, we can afford to be less efficient and still win. And of course, if Melkers bagged those two set shots in the first half, our efficiency on the weekend would have jumped over Hawthorn's to 25%. Keep up the good work, chaps. Go D's. So, Big Man, you're our resident statistician. You said to table one of your comments to now, I can't even remember what it was. Is this a concern or is this par for the course across the league? And some weeks you win the stat, some you don't. Of the matches Go Lord he mentioned, we only lost one of those matches and it was by the barest of margins.
It's not a concern. It's a function of the way we play. 63% to 37% time in half. If you watch the last quarter, it was crazy in the last quarter. It was 70%, 31% or 69, 31 in that last quarter. And then I reckon in the last 10 minutes of play, or there was a period of time where it was up our end, I think from what was it? So we had 13 of 17 inside 50s with 4 minutes to go. So we had, of the previous inside 50, 17 inside 50s, we had 13 of them with 4 minutes to go in the third. And in that period, in the third quarter, not the last quarter, in that period, the first clear shot at goal that we got was that dodgy free kick that Van Rooyen got for a block, which was taken all day of the week, given the amount of blocks that get through to the keeper. My point being is that if you watch it again, you've got 36 players squashed into an inside 50. There's just no space. So it's all about trapping it in, and then they kept on kicking it out, and we kept on marking it, Rivers or Levers, and just putting it straight back in. But they're putting it straight back in to a super crowded forward line. So, of course, we're going to be inefficient because the sort of goal roll he gets there in the end, I think, with his comment is about, it's just sheer weight of numbers. So not only are we getting it in, the thing is we're getting re-entry. So we're not allowing it to transition out to the other end of the ground. So they can't score. And okay, our efficiency may not be great, but that's because it's so crowded. So in that example, on the 17th time that we had an inside 50, we finally got a free kick, and Van Rooyen had a shot on goal, which he got. But the others was, it's just crazy. Like they had to lead to pockets, all the leading lanes are clogged. So it really is a function of, we've talked about this a few times during the season, when you are on top with inside 50s and you're playing forward half 50 like Melbourne, when you're dominating the opposition, you are always going to be re-entries and getting re-entries. You're going to get re-entries into a super, super crowded inside 50, which is going to make, there's almost no way not to be have low efficiency in terms of score to inside 50 ratio.
Let's get on to tagging because we're getting up to the 2:15 mark and we've got still a bit to go. I think this could be a long one. D Minion says, I've been critical in the past of Goody not employing a tagger to negate some of the star midfielders that cause us headaches, and found his comments about Finn McGuinness to be very odd. He claimed that Finn is clearly someone who doesn't want the ball. Is Goody not aware of the tagging role in footy? I have no issues with Finn McGuinness being used as a tagger. He did a great job in curtailing one of the best accumulators in the business and keeping him to 14 touches for the match. Thoughts from the panel? Keep up the great work, guys. Love what you do. Now, I don't disagree with that. I thought the comments from Goody were a little bit odd, considering that tagging has been part of the game for a long time. It's not always used, it's used sparingly, and it's not always effective. I think Goody was just probably frustrated by it at the end of the game, but I find the criticism of McGuinness, the player, to be a bit odd in that it was directed towards the player and not the opposition coach who gave the player the job and who wouldn't not have cared whether Finn got a touch or not. The goal was to negate Clary's influence and keeping him to 14 possessions. I guess it was mission accomplished. And I'm sure Mitchell would have been wrapped with Finn's performance. Man, do you think it was odd that he sort of attacked the player?
I love those comments from Goody. I loved it. Absolutely.
No, because you want to see emotion from Goody, but
no. I loved it because for me, two things. I don't reckon he was speaking to McGuinness. He was speaking to Mitchell.
Okay,
he's saying because he's been very strong on this. He thinks tagging is bullshit, and he philosophically doesn't like it. He says it all the time because we can move that tag around. We can take him out of the play. So essentially, sure, McGuinness that's his point that he's making. He's not trying to knock McGuinness. He's trying to tell Mitchell is that this is a stupid philosophy. Because so what? His point being he doesn't get any possessions. So Oliver doesn't. Okay, maybe you're net positive because Oliver doesn't. So that means essentially it becomes 22-22. If you've got 22 better players than the opposition, well, then you're sacrificing one player. And as Goody's said, he can move that tag around wherever. He can go forward. So, for instance, Oliver took 2 ruck down the forward half. And when McGuinness can't tag then, suddenly we get an advantage. We got a goal from it. So I actually loved it. And I thought, though, it wasn't really a go at McGuinness. It was about whatever happened at quarter time and the niggle, because that was serious niggle. As I said, I watched them on the binoculars. They were really going at each other, and the whole team, Viney was in there. There was a bit of spite there. So I suspect that that's the filter that Goody's had, and he's such a player's player. That's why I loved it, because he was basically still supporting Oliver is the way I read it. And I agree with him, because, go out and get the footy. The best taggers, whatever you think of taggers, the very best taggers get the footy themselves. Like, they don't get, that's back in 1989, 92, you can run around and get 4 or 5 possessions. So, Goody's happy for our best players to be tagged. I like those comments from Goody.
We have a question from Demonland Royalty, Whispering Jack, who says, when Hawthorn beat Collingwood recently, there were great raps placed on Mitch Lewis, Jai Newcombe, Chad Wingard, and, of course, James Sicily. I'd like to hear the panel's views on Melbourne's performance yesterday in light of the fact that 3 of their star players from that game were missing, out injured. Now, anyone who doesn't already know, Whispering Jack is my dad, and if any of you are wondering if MFCSS is passed down from generation to generation, well, that question from Whispering Jack is your answer. Sure, the Hawks had some big outs. Mitch Lewis is their key forward, and having him in would have further stretched our defences. Jai Newcombe is going to be a superstar if he's not already. He had 40 possessions the week before, and he too would have bolstered their midfield. Chad Wingard has had a good year this year. He doesn't worry me as much as the other 2. But injuries are a part of footy, and to answer Whispering Jack, I will remind him that we are without almost our entire premiership forward line and our premiership centre-half back, who was already ably filling in for our injury-riddled forward line, is now out injured too. Injuries are part of footy. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes superstars actually come back in just in time to play the Demons, and Whispering Jack and his MFCSS strong genes that he's passed on would well know, and because I hear him moaning about it constantly, to the point where my MFCSS has become completely debilitating, as this audience witnesses on a weekly basis. So, Bim Man, has our victory been soured for you now that Whispering Jack has tried to put a dampener on the celebrations?
Well,
passive-aggressive.
I was thrilled, though, when Jai Newcombe wasn't playing. So he's exactly the sort of player that would have tested us. I mean, they've been brilliant out of the middle, so that sort of really knocked him about. Look, I think that goes to my comment about Goody's coaching, is that I think more and more he looks at what the opposition gives and how they want to play the game, and takes it, like a game of tennis where you feel out the opposition, get a handle on what their tactics are. And he would have done the same thing, with those players in. It wouldn't have made any difference to the win. It doesn't, to me, take, that's the whole point about each game not being a litmus test for the our ability to win a flag. It's all about a stepping stone to get there. It's a hurdle we got over. We would have got over it with those players in. I'd love Jai Newcombe at the club. He's awesome. And Chad Wingard was a big out, actually, because, we've struggled over time with those small forwards. So, but it doesn't take anything away from the victory.
Whispering Jack tells me that he listens to the podcast, but I'm not sure whether he actually does or not. So this will be a good. I'm not going to say anything about anything I've said. So Whispering Jack, if you listen to this portion of the show, let me know that you listen to it, and then I'll know whether you listen to the show or not. About the Arc, El Diablo 14 says, I would love a 5-minute rant from Bim Man. Getting other time. But I'd love a 5-minute rant in regards to the AFL and the way they've handled the whole Arc review when the umpires calls, an umpire calls disasters. What is going to happen when this occurs in a big finals match? So last week, in regards to track goal or point, whatever, I was saying to people that based on the current rules and the antiquated technology, the right decision was made because there was no conclusive evidence to overturn the soft call, and you can argue about whether the soft call was right or not. The AFL simply have to put money to get the goal line technology right, because one day it will cost a team a place in the final, which it did, or cost a team a final, or heaven forbid. Can you imagine that Adelaide thing was in the grand final? The Adelaide goal on the weekend is a different scenario to the one the week before. And I was under the assumption that they reviewed every single goal. I remember watching a game. I think it was.
Yeah, they do. But it was a point.
I know. They don't need the goal.
So score, only every single goal.
Okay, because I think that it was last year when it was mentioned by the commentary team. So you've confirmed that. And I think I remember hearing an umpire say it over the mic, saying to the player, when a goal had been kicked. But it seems, I don't know how it can work for points. Like I think, how does it work for points? Because they know players no longer have to wait for the flag to be waved. They can be off immediately. They can't stop play after every score until we go through the arc system. That will extend the playing time and will allow teams to set up and could stop momentum, etc., etc. Something has to change because the system with this technology clearly isn't working. And can you imagine if the Crow-Swans game was a grand final and there is definitive proof that you won the game and you were robbed like that? Big man, I know you have a solution for points and goals, and
well, the short, not 5 minutes because we're well out of time. But the two things that is getting confused about this incident is it's a system error, but the system was followed. The goal umpire was certain that it hit the post, so he had no other option but to. Of course, he should have called for a review, but the rule is that you call for a review if you're not certain. Yeah. He was certain, right? So he just made an error. Okay. So the thing that, I said this last week, what they should have done in 2009 with the Hawkins thing, where all of this kicked off, was all about when Hawkins hit the post and it was given a goal, is they should just award a goal if it hits the post and goes through. Because in that scenario that happened, it would have been called a goal. It wouldn't have mattered that the umpire thought it hit the post. That's neither here nor there. It would have been a goal. Now, I've heard on the radio and in different forums lots of reasons why that wouldn't work. And a couple of them are just plain ridiculous. One saying, well, no, just get the technology right and put it in a good system. The AFL just has to put in a good system. Well, show me one time that the AFL, through this whole ARC palaver, has put in a good system. Anything that involves the AFL coming up with a good system is a stupid idea, number one, right? So that honestly, it's just they have no track record of getting their shit together with this at all. So take that off the table. But if you had just made that a point, another one, people say, well, that would mean that all goal kicking records would somehow have an asterisk on it because of this new scoring thing of hitting the post and going through. Well, there's already a asterisk on them. Like, just take the stand rule. I reckon there'd be 50 to 60 less goals kicked this season if not for that stand rule. They're giving players so much latitude to play on. They're kicking from inside 50 multiple times a game where they would have been kicking from outside 50. So that's changed the game. Even having a review system changed the game. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have lots of goals that weren't given and vice versa that were taken off them. So that's a stupid one as well. It would just save a lot of money. There would be no grey area. It hits the goalpost and goes through. Touch is a different one. We could have a different discussion on that. But the goalpost hits it, goes through. It's still a goal. Point hits it, goes through the point. It's a point. No grey area. No need for a camera. No need to have hours and hours of conversation about the poor bugger who makes a mistake. That's a goal, and Adelaide make the finals.
Yep, and there's an extra game now as well.
And there's an extra, and look, we talked about this last week. This is big business. I just heard tonight it's $4.5 billion Channel 7 paid for this. So of course they should get the technology right. Of course they should get the systems right. But I have no trust in the AFL to do either because they haven't shown that they've been able to do it. For me, that's a simple, elegant solution to a problem that's going to repeat and repeat. It's going to happen all the time.
Well, finals week one, we did get this question this week, which has surprised me because each week for the past few weeks, someone has invariably asked it, but who and where would you like to play the first week in finals? And I have written all the permutations, but if I go through them, it's going to make this show longer. Fact is, a couple of teams we can play. Collingwood, I won't go through the permutations of how, but we could play Collingwood at the G. Could play Brisbane.
Collingwood at the G. That's it. That's what I want.
Brisbane in Brisbane, Port
that.
in Port. But, and I asked you this after the game, if we lose to Collingwood, and I know you'd prefer to play Collingwood because you think that we can beat them and get to a preliminary final, but if we do,
and it's at the G and we can go.
If we do lose to Collingwood, there's the worry. There's two very hard games coming up. We're on the Carlton
with a severe case of
well, this is my. I explained to you. You heard why.
Final after a loss.
Yeah. So that's Carlton and then Brisbane in Brisbane.
No.
And I think that's the hard. That's the hard side of the draw.
Going to play out, Andy. We're going to play Collingwood at the MCG in front of a packed house. We're going to flog them. Well, win in a tough game. They're going to play Dacos when they shouldn't. They're going to play more when they shouldn't. They're going to lose. Carlton are going to beat GWS. Carlton are going to play Collingwood and beat Collingwood, and the Pies are going to go out in straight sets. And we're going to see how happy McRae is, how optimistic he is after that all transpires.
Big call. But yeah, I think that's the hard side of the draw. I think the easy side of the draw, but it's very unlikely.
Any side of the draw we're on is hard for the opposition. We are the best team in the AFL. We'll win the flag.
Okay, you said it there. All right, don't need to go through all the permutations. That's wants to play Collingwood here. Well, I do too. Because
only one that really, in all seriousness, the game that worries me is Brisbane. Playing Brisbane in Brisbane would put a big dint in our chances of winning the flag.
But wouldn't you prefer if we do play, wouldn't you prefer to play them in that first week rather than in preliminary final?
No.
Because I know you think we're going to beat Collingwood, but yeah.
Okay. We want to play in the G round in the first week of finals and we'll win. So I don't want to play Brisbane. We could, if Port lose and we win and Brisbane win, we'll play Brisbane in the first week of finals, and we don't want that. Do
you think we would throw the game?
Not do our best to win? Well,
because we'll know before the game. Because Port's playing before us.
If selected in the senior team, we might have an insight into.
Because I imagine we're going to pick. When we're playing on a Sunday, so we'll have to name the team before we.
My answer to that would be that we would never not go into a game wanting to win,
wanting to lose.
The question would be, as we've said mid-season, would we do everything we can to win? And I think no, probably.
Do you think they would be honestly? Do you think there would be that consideration if we know that if we win,
and if they want to play Collingwood first week of finals, is to be honest. And so, what would you want them to? If the risk was, we'll know on Sunday.
Well, we'll know before
Brisbane in Brisbane or Collingwood. If we beat Sydney, we play Brisbane.
Well,
what would you rather?
I know, but I think Goody will back us to win wherever, whenever.
Yeah.
So I think he'd still go out to win, but I don't know.
You don't, and also you don't want to play with form. So look, I mean, if you're asking me what I would do,
and look, Sydney, as I said, I don't think Sydney are just going to be that. Sydney might need to go out to win. I think they will need to go out. I think they want to play that home final. That's what they're playing for, regardless of any of the results.
Port's just got to beat Brisbane. Port's just got to beat Richmond, and then it's a completely, it's a moot.
And I think Port will beat Richmond. I know Richmond have a few players playing the last game, but
playing. I mean, Cochin's retired already. Why can't they travel interstate or something when they play?
And so is
Rewalt. They're not playing.
Oh, is Rewalt not playing either?
Well, I think so. I think they're just retired.
Well, they've said they're retired at the end of the year. Have they retired?
I don't know. My assumption was they're not playing next week. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, we'll see. The Casey Demons premiership defence continued its problematic end run with its third single-digit defeat in a row on Sunday after going down to Carlton by 8 points and losing at home to Williamstown the week before the bye by a single point. Casey has fallen from being in top 4 calculations a month ago into 7th place and a wildcard playoff against 10th place North Melbourne to remain in the finals race. The 2-point loss to Brisbane Lions was all the more galling as it took place at the club's home fortress after its early dominance had seen it build up a 33-point lead by early in the second term. However, the Brisbane team regrouped and turned the game on its head after the 10-minute mark of the second quarter, booting 10-10 to 5-5 for the remainder of the game. Tom McDonald with 3 goals, 14 disposals and 5 marks was putting his hand up for a recall. Brodie Grundy with 37 hitouts was winning the ruck duels against Darcy Ford, and Luke Dunstan was racking up another 30-plus possession game as well as snagging 2 goals. Charlie Spargo had 23 possession, 10 marks and a goal, and newly signed Tajwa Woden had 20 touches as well as a goal. The player of the most interest, however, might well be unlucky defender Daniel Turner, who returned from a break with injury and was right in the action with 25 touches and 8 marks. Young key forward. Young key forward Matt Jefferson was busy early but faded, as did veteran Michael Hibberd. B-Man, you said you didn't see the game. Neither did I. That was Casey from Casey's review. So I guess there's not much else to talk about it because none of us saw it. So let's get on to changes. With the Demons guaranteed a double chance, the opportunity is there for the D's to rest some players. We will know by Friday night whether Collingwood has sewn up the minor premiership and therefore 4th place means a game against Collingwood at the G. In any event, with the Lions playing a twilight game on Saturday and Port playing before us on Sunday, we will know exactly what a win and a loss looks like for us in terms of who and where we will be playing in the first week of finals. Demon WA asks, do we rest key players and back ourselves to smash the Pies in week 1 of the finals? Supreme Demon asks, who gets dropped this week against the Swans? Cozzy Pickett was poor, but I have faith he will bounce back this week. Adam Tomlinson is as slow as treacle, second person to say that, but he allows Jake Lever and Stephen May to play with more freedom when we have 3 key tall defenders. But would it be better bringing in Michael Hibberd to play on the Swans' dangerous small to medium forwards? As we know, he's done well on Papley. Got a voicemail from Salty, Uncle Mate. I'll play that.
Hey boys, Salty here. I just thought I'd give you a call. Question: do you think we should be throwing the game, given Collingwood beats Essendon? Do you think the Demons should just pretty much rest everyone and maybe throw the game and make sure we have a game against Collingwood first week of the finals? I think we just don't want to play Brisbane in Brisbane if we can avoid it. So, what do you think on that? And interested in hearing your changes for the week. I thought Track and Clary had pretty quiet games, but I was really impressed with McVee. Rivers is going to a new level this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a future captain of the club. Yeah. All right. Have a good call. Thanks, bye.
All right,
I hadn't listened to Salty's audio, but he's spot on. So I was obviously channeling Salty.
Yep. So there you go. So you think
we'll do the Freo? Isn't that what Freo did that year that caused all the help? That's why we've got a bloody pre-finals bye because of that.
I mean, can you see us resting Max? I mean, I don't know.
No, I can't. I can't see.
Yeah.
I can see us using the bench in the same way we did in the North Melbourne game, and I'm sure, and probably in this game too, and limiting minutes for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, look, it's Sydney.
So will the Swans.
Sydney have been playing very well, so it's not going to be like I guess if we get on top of them and crushing them, we definitely will use the bench a lot, but I can't see us being in that position. Oh, we do have George has provided us ins and outs that I'll play now. So let's hear what George has to say. Where's his ins and outs? Oh, bugger me! I didn't put it on the thing. Let's give me 2 seconds, big man. You can vamp for 2 secs if you can.
I've got no idea about ins and outs this week. I'm not even going to try to guess because I can't get it right. But it will be fascinating to see. You'd think that Laurie gets another go because it's not really Goodwin's style to just give him 1 week unless it's explicitly been framed for him that you're going to get 1 week for the big time and out you come. So maybe it is as simple as he's been brought in and Fritter comes in a direct swap. The one thing I will say is I'm relatively confident that I was very confident Spargo would come in. I'm even more confident this week that Fritter will come in just because pretty much I think in the press a goodie said as much. So,
all right, I've got just downloading, and I'll whack it over onto this other computer so that you'll be able to hear it. There we go. Play it.
It's like the equivalent of the movie with watching the download.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what was happening. I got it now. Got to turn up.
Once again, it's going to be a problem for the selection committee, particularly with our position on the ladder. And the fortunate thing for us as we enter the game on the Sunday is that we'll have a fairly good idea of where we'll actually finish up on the ladder. However, before then, we still have to select a team. Based on what happened this week, I think there are a couple of easy ones. Firstly, Goody's indicated that Fritter will come in as a definite. I think Shaki is a complete and utter bust. So there's an easy swap from those two for a start. Whether they choose to play T-Mac as well, I think this is probably their last opportunity. The result is that I think that they may well swing Smith down to the back line to cover the hole, because Tomlinson is the other obvious out for me in the side. Whether Hibbert's available is going to be a difficult question, and particularly with Sydney's situation, he may not be as needed as what he would have otherwise been. It appears that Tom McCartan, for example, has been given a 2-week penalty. So the next question is, given the tiredness that appeared in a number of the players, are we going to roll the dice with the managing of a few? The possibility, for example, is do we play Woden instead of Cozzy to give him an extra week break? It's a difficult one. With McCartan out, is there the chance to give JVR an extra week's break with Tommy Mack to fill the hole? Difficult questions for them this week, but we're in the position that Geelong perhaps found themselves in last year, that you can afford to do these sort of things at this time of year once you've got all the money in the bank with the wins that we need. I doubt very much that we'll have the opportunity to get to either a second position on the ladder. There doesn't seem to be much point going too hard at the game, and I still think we'll beat Sydney regardless, because bringing in people like T-Mac and Fritter and Woden and even Hibbert as well means that we're probably strengthening our position rather than reducing it. So hard job for the selectors with this week. I'm glad I'm not doing the job.
Don't know where George was doing his audio from. Sounded like he was on the factory floor somewhere. I did I cleaned up all the other audio that he sent through, so you might not have heard that. But that one was fresh off Dropbox. So
he made a lot of sense, I have to say, and that's. I hadn't really considered that. I mean, Goody has said that he is open to managing players, and he has a little bit this season with Hibbo, and there's been some other examples bringing Wowie in. So, yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe that's part of the Shaki thing, is maybe Shaki was brought in with the thing that he will replace JVR this week, for instance. So maybe they wanted to give him a run last week. I know that's contradicting what George said, but, maybe T-Mac, I can't see them. I just didn't think he looked fit enough, but maybe he needs the run. I'm not sure at senior level. But he makes a good point, George, about why not. They're not going to get any continuity anyway, because there's the pre-finals bye that throws that out anyway. So why not manage players and protect maybe a kid like JVR who needs a break?
So preview versus the Swans. After an up and down start to the season, the Swans looked on the verge of joining the Cats in not making the finals after appearing in last year's grand final. They've won their last 6 matches on the trot and have now secured a finals berth. A win or loss could determine whether they're playing for a home final, which they will know before the ball is bounced. Big man, anything you want to give us a rundown on the Swans in terms of what you've noticed from them this season or the past 6
really,
weeks?
I mean, definitely enough. It's probably the team I've watched least this season. I think Goulden's obviously a key player for them. Carton is a huge, huge out, as George was suggesting. That's massive. He is that intercepting player, which might free up a Melksham to be a bit more attacking. I mean, they'll still play someone to play that role, but there's no one that comes to mind that can do it to the level he can. So maybe that might free Melksham up to be a bit more offensive, not having to mind a player. They'll be hard at it. They always are. They value contested ball. They play their own ground really well. I think it'll be interesting. I'd love to see him put a bit of time into Goulden, not tag. Goody doesn't tag, but at least minimise his impact. Selection's going to be, a curious one. I think it's just sets up for a weird game, a weird dynamic. So tactically, it's hard to get a handle on how it will go. They'll want to look to beat us at the contest. That's their strength. But, I think we've definitely got them covered in that area. And really the thing that, hopefully we'll look to cut out the influence of their halfback flankers who move the ball down the ground, and hopefully Papley doesn't get a touch. Not sure who will get if he doesn't come in, but McVie maybe takes Papley. He's taken a lot of good jobs, but he's a pretty strong fella. So I think it promises to be a weird game, is what my feeling is. So I've got no sense of I think we'll win, but I've got no sense of how the game will play out. I just hope that we get through it. No injuries, all of that sort of stuff. But, I think the selection's going to be the real curious and interesting thing for the week.
Yeah, it certainly will be. All eyes will be on that. And, it'll be interesting because we'll know sort of where we stand, what we need to do or not do before the game. So it's not how the AFL in the lead up in the last 6 weeks, they were absolute. They thought there'd be movements galore. The Bulldogs loss just threw a spanner in the works.
And the Adelaide loss.
Well, the Adelaide. So if Adelaide had won, that we didn't talk about that when we talked about the ARC thing, but it affected 3 clubs. Geelong are out of it now as a result. I saw it before. It was Geelong. Obviously Adelaide themselves, and there was one other club that
Dogs, I think, as well.
Well, the Dogs screwed themselves. So.
I think the AFL are going to change the name of ARC to FARC.
That's
it's just been a mess, hasn't it? So.
Absolutely. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, so it promises not to be. The only game really of consequence is the GWS, which is the very last game. That's good for the AFL when they desire to create drama. GWS Carlton, because I think GWS will need to win that to get in, and that has a cascading effect. But obviously Carlton needs to, I'm not sure whether they keep their 5th if they lose that spot, for instance.
They can if St Kilda win and Carlton lose, then that's the only way they can lose the spot.
Right.
But I can't see St Kilda beating Brisbane at home.
And I mean, I can't remember a game off the top of my head, but that feeling of a game where it's dead rubber is it's the worst game in footy, isn't it? Because it's like finals when you just don't want an injury, and that's when everyone gets a bit nervous. And so you're probably right. Just pick a team, even if it's do rest some players and go out hardcore to win. But maybe, as George is suggesting, manage some key players like Cozzy even or JBR and see how you go from there.
All right, that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. We'll be back next week. Hopefully a miracle where the D's win and all the teams above us fall in a heap, Bradbury style. If you want to listen to the show live next week, and please head over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Demons Barnacle, Jack, Spargonicus, and Jumping Jack Clement. Swatter5/PW Wingman. You'll get your thank you if you change that 1-star to a 5. Thank you to our voicemailers, Salty and 3183D. Thank you to our caller, Noah from Bentley. And thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. They form an integral part of this show. So thank you to Ever D, Bay Riffin, Travie14, Red and Blue Beard, Stu, Buck Naked, Rue Beauty, Lazy Smurf, Oh My D's, D Old Fart, Prestige D, Titus Toddy, Scroll, Singer, Deceiving, Bigfoot, Supreme Demon, Red Jacket, Royal Demon, Radelaide, Go Lordy, D Minion, Whispering Jack, El Diablo 14, and Demon WA. Thank you to my co-hosts, Bimman, and thank you very much to George for providing those clips that we played throughout the night. It felt like you were here the whole time. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget to leave us that 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out on the next show. And don't forget, check out our YouTube channel to watch the show. Just search Demonland Podcast, and please like and subscribe. See you next week. Go Demons.
Red Leggers.